Good evening and welcome to the Thursday, April 25, 2024 meeting of the school committee. We have just returned from executive session and I would invite those here in the studio and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right.
Network here is robot.
So yes, so just for people here in attendance, just to be aware that this meeting is being recorded. It is available then for replay for people who are not able to watch live or who love our meeting so much they want to watch a second time. So the first item on our agenda is public comment. Is there anybody who would like to make a public comment? Okay. Seeing none, we can go into recognitions. Are there any recognitions that people would like to make?
Oh, I definitely wanted to make. So we don't have Jack here today, and maybe he would have talked about it. But I'm not going to get all of them right, but at least two of our high school instrumental groups, the band and the orchestra, won gold at MICA. And so I actually got to go and see them the first weekend of break. They played at the Groton Hill Concert Hall, which was amazing. I've never seen anything like it. When we pulled up to it in the middle of nowhere, it was beautiful, and they sounded fantastic. So those were for all the gold winners in the state. They all got to attend. So I know that it was their band and orchestra, and then I believe one of the jazz ensembles also won gold or silver. I can't remember which one. Because we got to see the jazz ensemble play this week at the high school. So I just wanted to congratulate all the musicians and certainly Mr. Hay and all of the teachers in the program, because the kids did phenomenal and it was just amazing to watch, especially because our musical groups tend to be a lot smaller than some of the other high schools, and they still sounded phenomenal. So
That's awesome. That's always exciting to see, and our musical groups have done so well with Mr. Hay and all of our music department. All right, anybody else? Okay, in that case, we can move into the next item on our agenda, which we do not have a student council rep tonight, so that brings us to the superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you. So this is the superintendent's report for April 25th, 2024. In this report tonight, you will very quickly talk about the naming of facilities. We'll talk about the Best High Schools in Massachusetts Award. We'll look at some of the rankings among similar districts, and I just started to do that work when I got those Best High School in Massachusetts rankings. We will look at enrollment related to the Hopkins project, and then I also have some great news from Micah, echoing much of what Lori just said.
oh, did I steal your thunder?
Nope, that's okay. We could have all the thunder we like on this property. So just a reminder that we have on the table the naming of the auditorium at the high school, the stage at the high school, in honor of Valerie von Rosenvinge, who is retiring at the end of this year. Typically, I will let you know if we've had any other information on this, and we've received no commentary. So. U.S. News and World Report rankings, you know that they come out with these once a year. Hopkinton High School this year was ranked 7th. And I think that there's a lot to celebrate here. If you take a look at the list, we have 2 exam schools on there, the John D. O'Brien School of Math and Science and Boston Latin. And then we have 3 charter schools, so that leaves Lexington High School at 3rd and Hopkinton High School at 7th. So I like to think that we were really the second-ranked public high school. I know they're all publicly funded, but I think that a public school is a little bit different in that your clientele are the people who live within your geographic footprint. So,
What is an exam school?
yeah, so you have to sort of apply to get into like a Boston Latin. Or,
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
even though it's publicly funded. So that got me looking at some comparative data, and what this chart will show you, and it comes right off the radar data, is we can take a look at our grade 10 MCAS, and the way they categorize it is how many students, what percentage of students were either meeting or exceeding expectations in ELA and math, and then they lump together grade 3 to 8 MCAS and who was meeting or exceeding expectations in ELA and math. So I don't know why, but I'll start over here on the right-hand side. And in math, grades 3 to 8, 78% of our students were either meeting or exceeding expectations. In Lexington, that number was 79, and so that means that we were sort of second in that category among these towns. And in ELA, we were 75% of our kids were either meeting or exceeding. Lexington was 76, and Wellesley was 76. And so, you know, in that category, we're like sort of third there, and that feels very good to be among those communities. When we take a look at meeting and exceeding for grade 10, in math, we were at 87, and we have Lexington at 92, but again, Wellesley at 89, but again, we are ahead of all of those other communities, and in ELA, we were at 88. Lexington was at 90, Wayland was at 88, and again, we're at the top of the heap there, so that feels really great. But maybe this is the part that should make us also feel pretty great when we look at our per pupil expenditure, and this is our in-district per pupil expenditure. We're spending $15,652 per student. If we look at the people on that list who are our sort of competitors, we can see that Lexington is paying $21,352 for their students. Wayland is at $21,000, I'll just round up. Wellesley's at almost $24,000, and Weston is at $29,000. So it feels very good to have our rankings. And when we take a look at some of our subgroup enrollment that has happened over the last 5 years, if we look at our students with disabilities, we had 476 students in 2020. We now have 600 in 2024. So there's been a 26% increase. Our English learners, and you probably will remember this from our budgeting days, in 2020 we had 238. We went up to 262, then 278, and now we're down to 213. So when we look at that 5-year piece, we have dropped by 11%. And our economically disadvantaged numbers, percentage is up 41%. So I point those out because we always say that it costs a little bit more money to educate students with disparate needs. And despite the fact that those populations, a couple of those populations are growing, we still have super high scores and a very reasonable per pupil expenditure. I like to think that with something like the English learners, it's an illustration of how fiscally responsible we really are when we budget.
The economic disadvantage went up 41%.
It did, but we have to be very careful to note that what we really mean is that we've gone from 207 students to 291 students.
Is that new move-ins, or are those families that may have fallen below?
We really
Because
have
of-
no way of knowing that.
Okay.
And I think we talk about this sometimes when we're thinking about policy as well. So there's state certification, and so you get from the state a list of students who would, qualify. And when you get that, it really goes to our food services director. And that person, unless a parent gives us the authorization to do so, we cannot share that information, so. We just wanted to talk a little bit about enrollment in the Hopkins project. So I know people are wondering, how is our enrollment tracking? So this is as of today. We have 335 students in grade 4, 354 in grade 5, and 309 in grade 6. If we lump together grades 4 and 5, we have 689 students, and if we lump together grades 5 and 6, we have 663, and it's important to do that because as we look at Hopkins now, it's a 4-5 school, and eventually it may become a 5-6 school. You know that we have 2 different demographers. One is Dr. Arthur Wagman. If we look at the projections that he did for the 22-23 23-24 school year. In grade 4, Dr. Wagman said that by the end of the school year, we'd have 322 kids. Currently, we have 335. What he projected for 24-25 was 324. So currently, our grade 4 enrollment, according to his projections, exceed where we would be in June of 2025. Something similar happens in grade 5. He projected 332 by the end of this year. We're at 354 and 337 at the end of next year. So again, our current enrollment is exceeding next year's end of school enrollment. And in grade 6, he projected 312. We're currently at 309. So we are pretty much tracking right on with grade 6. If we take a look at the MSBA, we'll take a look at grades 4 and 5 together and 5 and 6 together. And we are doing that because we are using their numbers to take a look at the Hopkins School. And we had said repeatedly when we were making the decision about should we keep it a 4 or 5 school and just build a 2-3 school, or should we build a 2-3-4 school and make Hopkins a 5-6 school. In terms of enrollment, that was fairly negligible because the MSBA was predicting 802 if it's a 4 or 5 school and 803 if it's a 5-6 school. The differences in the way these demographers work is that Dr. Wagman would project a number that he would say this is probably the actual number that you're going to see. With the MSBA, you see a whole lot of numbers in a chart over time, and what they're doing is taking a 10-year average. So the 10-year average is what you see here with 802 and 803. So if we take a look at the number we have today, we're at 689. This is the projected number for 2032. So we're about 113 students away from where we would be in 2032, which is 8 years away. And for the 5-6 numbers, we are at 663. If we subtract that from 803, we're about 140 students away from where we would be as the MSBA predicts it in the year 2023.
Can I ask you a question here? The first chart, the grade 5 this year is at 354. If I look at the grade 6 projections, they were 341. So if all the grade 5 students move into grade 6, we're already over next year's end of year projection
Yes,
by quite a bit, without any move-ins or anything.
yes.
So I think it's interesting because way back when we got these original projections from Dr. Wagman, we anticipated sort of the bubble moving was kindergarten, and then like we knew the early grades were going to bubble, and you can see it's expanding into grade 6.
Yes.
Now you can see that happening. And I remember when we got these, we thought they were high. A lot of people in the community thought they were quite high, and we're actually clearly tracking right on, if not, a little bit ahead. A little bit ahead, yeah.
If we take a look at grade 8 at 321, Mr. Bishop's senior class is at 286. So when they leave, you can see the difference in numbers of students that are going to be at the high school next year, 35 student difference. All right.
Typically, our kindergarten grade grows quite a bit between
Yes.
kindergarten and first grade. So it looks like we would be on track for next year to have every grade be over 300 kids,
I would think that's very likely, yes.
except potentially the kindergarten, but.
So, just to talk about where Lori was, I'd love to share the music department's successes. I want to thank all of the teachers and, of course, Mr. Hay. At the MICA Festival this year, 8th grade chorus earned bronze, 8th grade orchestra silver, and 8th grade band silver. At the high school, the chorus earned a bronze, orchestra, symphonic band, and concert band were all golds. So, lots to celebrate in the music department. Here's a quick picture of the high school orchestra. Here is a very quick picture of the high school band and a fabulous picture of Mr. Hay. I couldn't resist putting it on the slide. One Declan Hanscom took all of those photos for us, so that was quite nice. And that's what I have.
If you ever get to go there, like they have like actual other concerts there, it is stunning. And so like I can't. It was one of those places where we went into and was like, where did this place pop out of, and so it's worthwhile checking out their schedule just to see what else they have there. Most of it was for people of our generation and older, but I would say that there are some things of interest.
The symphonic band just got a reboot, right? A post-pandemic reboot. But I think for coming out of the pandemic, we had some contraction in the number of students in band, right? And I had heard Mr. Hay had announced at the winter concert that they were redividing for two. It was quite crowded at the winter concert. So I think they've now split back, which is exciting.
It is, he had emailed me to give me those numbers and say, I don't know if you remember, but they were at Hopkins School, some of them at the onset of the pandemic, and that was the very first thing we canceled, was a band concert at Hopkins. He was like, ta-da! So, yes, they're coming back to their former glory.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. That moves us then into the school committee chair report. Payroll warrant S24020 has been approved. Warrants 24-056S, 24-057S, 24-058S, 24-059S, 24-060S, and 24-061S have been approved. Warrants have been included in your folder. And then on April 4th, 2024, the executive session meetings from January 11th, 2024 were approved and released. Are there liaison reports that people would like to share? Okay.
None for me.
You good?
The adaptive playground is underway. And Susan does an excellent job.
Thank you.
Just the sustainable green, we can talk about this next time if you want, but they are bringing forward an article to town meeting, which is similar to what they brought last year on the specialized code for building. And they have a website, we can talk about it next time, I'm not prepared to go into it, but they do have a website if you want to look at it. It has to do with electrification of new construction. And maybe when we talk about Hopkins, we can just confirm that anything that we do with Hopkins or with Elmwood is not actually part of the specialized code, though I think we're well on the way to meeting it anyway. But something to take a look at if you're concerned about going green.
All right, that's great. Thank you. All right, so let's go into our old business and start with policy BDFB, which is the CPAC policy. I see that we do have CPAC members here in attendance. I want to invite up. I don't know, Abby, if you want to come up as well, be part of the discussion. Oh yeah, we got space right there. Yes. All right, so this is the fourth reading. Hello. Hi. Before we get into it, do you guys just want to introduce yourselves?
Sure, I forgot our little
I
names.
was-
So I'm
Okay.
here and I realized I forgot them.
We know you, but I want to make sure that folks at home.
I'm Jen Halliday, I'm the chair of CPAC.
Jamie Vronka, I'm the vice chair of CPAC.
Erica Siegel, events chair.
Excellent, thank you. So this is the fourth reading of this policy. I know that you guys did some work with the policy working group, so I'm eager to hear about that. Dr. Kavanaugh, do you want to
Sure. Yeah.
go over highlights?
Yes. So as Mrs. Kavanaugh just said, this is our fourth reading. We started this policy a very long time ago. The first reading was on April 13th, 2023. We looked at it again on April 27th and then again on May 11th, and it got put on the back burner and it has been revived. So the policy itself is really, just sort of a restatement of what the regulations in Massachusetts say. It talks about the mission of the Hopkinton Public Schools, and then it talks about the goals of the district to foster relationships with parents and guardians that encourage cooperation between home and school in establishing and achieving common educational goals for students, and then there are the regs. We did add a single sentence at that end of the first paragraph that says, the CPAC, the school committee, and the administration will work together in accordance with procedure BDFB, procedure 1. And so when we met with the CPAC board, we did talk about what we had indicated a good procedure might look like. So the first item on the procedures, we really have not changed in the last year. We eliminated writing Special Education Parent Advisory Council many times and just changed that to the CPAC acronym. The second one, we indicated that there would be time built in for a mid-year check-in, and that came about as a result of the meeting that we had with CPAC and with the CPAC board members. And we said that that meeting could occur through email, or that check-in could occur through email, a Zoom meeting, or an in-person meeting. On the third one, we said that we would establish a calendar every year in a partnership between the school committee, the CPAC, and the Director of Student Services. And we would make sure that the school committee invited the CPAC to a meeting at mutually agreed upon times to share annual goals or topics, and that would happen at least twice a year. We included educational programming in that, and I think that that may have been a more recent add. Number 4, we talked about the posting of the school committee packet, and we said that the school committee agenda and packet are posted 48 hours in advance of the meeting in accordance with open meeting law. And when a posted agenda contains an item of interest to the CPAC, the chair will afford a representative of the CPAC the opportunity to ask questions and provide feedback on that item during the meeting. The 5th one is an interesting one because we talked a lot about the communication that would happen between the school committee, the Director of Student Services, and a school committee liaison. And this is the language that the policy working group sort of settled on. So it says that that group will meet bi-monthly throughout the calendar year as schedules and inclination permit, and they would address mutual concerns. Meeting has proven beneficial to support parent-school collaboration and communication. And I think we looked at that language specifically because when we talk about procedure will outline what it is that you want the administration in the district to do. And that is what we want the administration in the district to do. So when we talk about things of mutual concerns, either party can bring something forward. And that way this particular procedure doesn't control what the administration may want to talk about or what the school committee may want to talk about or what the CPAC may want to talk about. And then the last one has been there for some time, that the Director of Student Services or a designee will host a meet and greet for CPAC and the team chairs in the fall. So that's it.
Thank you. Because we have a few questions, not on the policy, but the procedures.
Okay.
So I'll hand it over to Jamie. She's got more notes than I do.
So for number 2, we were wondering if because meeting calendar is referred to in multiple places, is this meeting calendar that's referring to specifically the CPAC School Committee Director of Student Services meeting? Should that be specified? We're pretty sure that's what it is, but we just wanted to confirm.
I think that's, it's your procedure. I don't know, but I thought that was what it was supposed to be.
Okay, I just wanted to confirm, because there's other places where meetings are referred to, so I just wanted to make sure, since there's multiple kinds of meetings.
Yes, so are you asking that when we create that calendar, if all of these referenced meetings would be on it? Is that the question?
I think she's asking what meeting calendar. Is it like the school committee meeting calendar or
Like the CPAC
it is-
calendar,
or the CPAC,
that the
it's
liaison may
specifically the
attend,
calendar
like
for these.
there's a number of meetings referred to in the document. I just wanted to know if we needed to identify which meeting type this is.
Yes, I think when it says in accordance with the meeting calendar established in partnership between the school committee, CPAC, and the Director of Student Services at the start of each year, all of these items, so the mid-year check-in, the times when CPAC would be coming to school committee, all of those things I think would be on that calendar.
Okay, thank you. And then another question on number 2. That second sentence that starts with specifically, that seems to, we don't think it was the intention, but the way that it could be read is an implication that the meeting calendar is limited to one email, potentially as like the floor expectation. So we were suggesting to strike specifically and write the word additionally instead, because I think that captures the intention without the vagueness.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you.
I
No
mean, I think we put that in there because one of the things that we worried about is that the last time we were all here in this space, we had made commitments to the CPAC that we were going to meet at very regular intervals, and that there would be check-ins with the school committee. And we feel like those things had not quite come to fruition, so we just wanted to make sure that there would be a time to check in to say, how is it going? Like, are all the things that we've agreed upon as parties at this table, have those things come to fruition? So whether it says specifically or additionally, as long as the spirit of that exists, I'm totally fine with it.
Great, thank you. No questions on number 3. On number 4, just 2 questions. One, and it's fine if this is the intention, it's just a question. With the sentence added about the school committee agenda and packet are posted 48 hours in advance in accordance with meeting law. That was just to summarize. This sort of implies in reading it that CPAC owns the need to monitor the agenda and identify if there are items. I don't think that's the actual intention. I assume from the conversation that we had in the 2 working groups ago when we discussed it, that there would be an expectation of open communication between the liaison and CPAC. Just the way that read, I just wanted to kind of identify the implication and make sure that wasn't the intention.
So I think just, and I'm looking at you guys because you guys have served in that capacity, that is the way that my assumption has been that there has been communication going back and forth around items like that.
Do you want it to say specifically that it's liaison's responsibility?
Or just, it doesn't, so I think we can cover it in the second sentence to make it more clear. It was the implication that I was checking in on because.
I would think that would be the responsibility of the liaison to make sure you guys knew.
That would make sense. I don't know if that's something that, again, that's a procedure for administration to follow and school committee to be aware of. So I guess it doesn't make sense to necessarily dictate whose job on the, to identify a person, but even just that it's cooperatively identified may make sense.
My hope would be that there's that back and forth conversation and that it's not something that you're discovering when you see the agenda as a board, that all of a sudden you're discovering something's on the agenda, that there would be an effort on the part of the liaison or the chair or somebody within that to notify you.
Yeah, if we're having our monthly meetings anyway, it shouldn't
Yes.
come as a surprise.
There-
When something is on the agenda, we should know about it ahead of time anyway, but the liaison knows, just to double check that we're in the loop.
There are very few things, not even CPAC related, that are added 48 hours within our agendas. Are usually planned a few days before that, at least within 48 hours is the posting requirement, and those things that are being added at the 48-hour mark are typically things that have to be added on because there's a sense of urgency. So I'm trying to think of what would be an urgent thing that might happen that we wouldn't know 48 hours, but there's no reason why that wouldn't be a conversation rather than finding it on the website that I can
Great.
think of.
Thank you.
I like your statement about sort of cooperatively doing that, because one of the things we did talk about in the policy meeting was that it's sometimes hard for us to know what agenda item there are agenda items that are nebulous. They just apply to all students, which of course by definition would encompass students with special needs. So part of the partnership for us, I'm hoping, is that you can keep an eye out and also be that alert for us that, hey, did you think about the new building construction and the special instruction spaces and how they, things that we are thinking about, but we may miss something. And I think you might have a better idea of where the intersection points happen for that population than we do. So we can try for the obvious ones, and, you can also share that responsibility. That would be great. I think it would work well that way.
So I also wanted to ask, when and I don't remember how this is written in the liaison role descriptions, but if there are procedures for the liaison role descriptions where, this is a very specific need for this liaison role as opposed to a different liaison role wouldn't have that similar requirement, where there may be something in the quote-unquote job description of the liaison to remind that that is part of the responsibility to be in contact about agenda items that may be of note for the CPAC.
So I think that's something that as a group, we need to kind of put on our beginning of the, like, when things in May kind of discuss, when we're discussing that first liaison piece, to discuss what some of the specific things are we want to make sure happen so that it's not, I mean, I would hope that that's happening with any, like, when we're discussing things with the budget, that I try to reach out to appropriations, because I'm the appropriations liaison, to say, we're going to be discussing this, and this budget, please come to the meeting. That's a little bit different than CPAC, because you guys have the ongoing meetings where that purposefully raising things. But I think that we should have that discussion at the beginning to reset on an annual basis so that everybody knows, so that while the 5 of us at this table know, and 6 if we include the fact that you'll be here, but in 5 years from now, the school committee and CPAC board could have overturned, and we want to make sure that that knowledge carries forward, that the intent is to have those conversations and not have it be a surprise for anybody.
Would it be of any benefit to have like a CPAC list of expectations, that when you guys are picking your liaisons, that, you know, if somebody would know what those expectations would be before taking the position on?
So I think definitely like a kind of back and forth, so that we have both what you guys are hoping for from us, and then kind of what we're hoping for to be able to do with you. So
I
sure
think
that
it would
works
be
together.
also really important that when a new liaison comes on board, is to sit down with the CPAC board and say, what are your expectations of the liaison? What do you need from this person? In order to, because it's so important to establish trust between the two entities. And one of the ways to gain and maintain is to know exactly what the expectations are on what kind of, thinking about it, like if I look at an agenda, I may not realize, or Adam may not realize what might be of impact to you. And I understand that you would like to have a heads up when when an agenda item might be of interest to you, if that makes sense. I see nodding heads, which means must be okay.
And ongoing, I think I agree with everything you just said, and I think ongoing, as things evolve, there may be things that we discover that we're not doing that would be helpful to be doing, and that's ultimately, we're here to
And then we can always change the procedures too.
procedures
over
are much
time
easier
when-
to be changed, right? And also even just informally, if you guys say, we really need this, or that's something that I would hope that those conversations increase and be able to make sure that we're functioning in the best way for all of our kids and all of our kids with special needs. So,
Thank you. No. So in, where were we?
Number 4, I think.
At number 4. So the second sentence in number 4, when posted agenda items, the chair will afford representative CPAC opportunity. So because it would be an open discussion during a meeting, potentially with an agenda item that we were not able to specifically reach out to the membership of CPAC or even discuss among the 6-person board ahead of time, it would be difficult to ask or expect one member of a 6-member board to represent the entire discussion. And so we were wondering if instead of a representative, I could just say representatives, knowing that we're not going to bring 6 people, but 2 or 3, especially if it's something new or something that seems important, so that one person doesn't have to represent the entire board and membership.
Yeah, that's.
We just
We're
didn't want to
getting
make sure
super
that we were.
specific with everything. This has to outlive the current board, so we
On
just
both
want to make
sides.
sure that it's,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think, you know, certainly that, I think specifying a number is not always going to be helpful. So if we say 3 and then there are only 2 of you, or there are 4 or whatever.
Just
about if it were
pluralize representative. That's
What if
all.
it were changed to the chair will afford representation of the CPAC community, which eliminates the need for singular, plural, or
Okay.
Lovely, fine
Tons.
with me. Okay. And then finally, on number 6, what we had in our notes that we discussed was an open forum, and this says meet and greet, and I don't know if that's the same thing. It feels not quite the same thing, so we were wondering about that.
I don't know what I was not part of that discussion, but what is the?
So what was your question, Janie?
So it says host a meet and greet, and so I don't know, like, what our drafts had open forum, and so we just weren't sure if that's quite the same thing, or if it is, or if it is, maybe it should just say open forum, since that's more clear to us, but.
What is it that's your expectation for that?
So when we initially proposed this and discussed it in this room together, we had discussed having it be not only the Director of Student Services and team chairs, but also building principals. And we can see that that they're, first of all, it didn't happen after we discussed it. And we understand the potential exclusion of building principals. And we were wondering if potentially that with team chairs, because there are the K-5 and 6-12 special education directors, should those be included? But to us, open forum sounds like there's more opportunity for actual questions and dialogue versus a meet and greet, which might just be an introduction.
Yeah, so having done many of those over the years, I can say I think a functioning meet and greet always turns into an open forum because we talk about things that come up. So I'm fine with that language. And, all of our meetings have like a question and answer period as well as dialogue and follow-up conversations. So.
I guess I always picture a meet and greet, people walking around with their cup of coffee or something and just talking to people.
Yeah, no, I mean, even this year we had a formal slide deck. We had photos
Okay.
of every person with a summary of the
So your
file.
meet and greet is a little more
Contact
formal.
info. Yeah, and the intention really is to ensure that people know who the contact person is at their building. I think including the directors is a very smart idea. And what I'm trying to get out of it as the director is to ensure that we start the year with people knowing who to call if they have a question. And put a name with a face. And so that's a really important foundation annually to do.
So meet and greet sort of works, or?
You want
do you
it to
wanna
be
change
more
to
more
forum,
formal.
Or do you want an orientation, or is it, what is, I don't.
I mean, I think our preference would be open forum, but if we are establishing that.
That works for you, Abby?
Really the same, then.
Yeah, I mean, the locus of control I have really are the team chairs and the directors, and I think we have plenty to talk about all the time.
Yeah.
So that would be fine by me.
Okay. Great.
Can I just go back to 4 for a second? Because I was thinking, and we moved on to 5. Would it be appropriate to say representatives of the CPAC board? Or do you want to leave it for any CPAC member to?
Representation is fine, just because we could designate somebody who might not be a member of the board, but might be the expert in that area that could speak to whatever the issue is.
If we were
I would
talking,
leave it a
for
little-
example, of the adaptive playground. You
Right.
might have somebody who is more,
Was a child in a wheelchair.
you might be more
might benefit
knowledgeable.
more and be able to speak a little bit more eloquently than myself.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think as a board, we're finishing our bylaws with a big update. And our roles are also defined as identifying who's coming to interact at these meetings, whether it's this meeting or the admin meeting. And so it wouldn't just be a free-for-all, 20 people show up. We would be organizing and making a thoughtful decision about who we're sending. And when possible, I think we try to have more than one person, but representation leaves it open so that if there's only one person who can come, we're not breaking our part of the bargain.
Yeah, I agree 100%. In the world where none of us are in this, or in these seats, there's no limit to them. By saying the board or designee, it kind of at least caps at a number that would be the board versus the whole membership. So to have actual dialogue at a school committee meeting, there are just practical limitations.
I
So
can't
didn't-
imagine, though, that a huge number of people would come.
Well, there have been times.
We had
Well, we had 6, yes.
I mean, you can't,
Yeah, sometimes they poop in, but
I just think the reason we said one is because that's how we operate. When we go to Sustainable Green or to appropriations, there's one of us there to listen and then say, hey, that could be of interest, or we should follow up as a committee and get it on the agenda, or there's one person. We also would love to have all of us, but because of open meeting law, we can't. So I get the ask, but there's a practical limit. If the spirit of this is that you come up and have dialogue, it is reasonable to put a practical limit on it, is all I'm saying, because.
What number do you suggest?
Well, I was saying the board, or limited to the number of members of your board, like a governing board, and you could designate someone else, but not.
So
a
max
bigger board,
6.
like 6, or, it's just a suggestion, because that's what we were thinking. We do want to have dialogue, but we don't want to have the
don't want a
entire
mob here.
CPAC. Just saying, to have a dialogue. We just can't practically do that. It has to be limited to some representation. Is all I think is reasonable. So, I guess this is an administrative policy, a procedure. So, Dr. Cavan, I look to you. I don't know what you want to put in here,
Well,
but.
And I think also what you're getting at, Amanda, is the fact that this particular portion is not talking about, like, if we need to have an open forum on a particular issue that's a meaty issue that needs to allow for public comment, and you specifically have a meeting for that issue versus a general school committee meeting where there may be an agenda item topic. As you can see, we have people waiting for different agenda item topics, like it can't go on for hours. So having it limited for those particular types of meetings versus where you're having a special forum where you would allow for many people to talk and share their thoughts, I think is the distinguishing factor.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
makes sense.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with even just saying with a cap of 6. Because if we capped it to the board, 15 years from now, maybe the CPAC board is 30 people. So like,
Yeah,
with the intention of making this live well,
yeah.
Yep.
I think that's
I would be
reasonable.
comfortable
Well,
with capping at 6, which
In
includes
policy,
the current board.
the procedure could be adapted in 15 years.
Right.
I think
I'd
that's
like to think
reasonable.
we're getting it right this time around, but things evolve.
There's always room
Yeah.
for improvement.
We can't predict the future. Well, for example, special needs parents, you might think you're gonna go at 5 PM and 6:30, you can't get out the door. It's always good to have, if you know there's 2 people gonna show up, at least one will make it, right? So that's part of the reason too, is that we would wanna make sure that if we say we're coming, that we actually are here.
Well, I think that's why, like, what you were recommending, Amanda, made sense, like representatives of the CPAC board. But I also think it's funny what Jamie said about the board growing that big, so maybe like you put
would be a dream.
representatives of the CPAC board with no more than 6, something like that.
We can cap it at 6,
The
that's fine.
percentage you've grown at in the time that we've known you as your board has been very high.
What did they start with?
1.
Just you? Okay. You were the whole board? The two
Well,
board?
The meetings were
It's gone through.
very exciting.
Did you have good meetings with
Yeah,
yourself?
awesome, yeah.
Years ago, it was bigger too, but it went through its own evolution of people growing and moving out of district. And so,
And then COVID.
COVID, yeah.
All right, so we're voting on the policy itself here. Are there any things, back to the policy, that feel like they're not quite right?
No notes.
Okay, no notes. All right, then I would recommend that we take action on the policy because it's been open, and we've taken the notes from the procedure to be added in to be referenced. Is there
I'd
somebody?
move to approve policy BDFB, CPAC.
A second?
Motion by Amanda, second by Susan.
I'm sorry,
Oh, sorry.
but like we
discussion.
just talked about amendments, so are we gonna talk about?
So that's the
That's
procedure, we're
yeah.
talking about it's the policy that we're voting, but we wanted to, because the procedure's attached in terms of, they impact each other, or actually, the procedure is referenced,
Yeah,
it's
I
just not voted as
misunderstood
part
what
of
I
it.
was reading.
Yep,
Okay, got it.
but it makes sense to discuss them all together and to make sure that we have the intent behind it clarified. for-
Understood. So the policy, the only change is working in accordance with the procedure is the new language, and then the rest of what we were just talking about are changes to the procedure. Got it. All right, sorry, don't mean to interrupt the motion.
That's okay. So it was a motion by Amanda with a second by Susan. All those in favor?
Aye.
And we unanimous. Thank you so much for coming out and for all the
Can I
time.
make
that-
2 quick plugs?
Of course.
One, I would just like to thank the community. Best Buddies is having their prom tomorrow night, and we got a last-minute request for decor and snacks and water and that sort of thing, and we reached out to the community, and within a few hours, we had everything they needed. So they're
Oh,
setting up
excellent.
tomorrow night, 6 to 8 tomorrow evening at the high school. Best Buddies is having their prom, so that's super exciting.
What
And-
time is it?
6 till 8. And I just wanted to, because we're not going to be here probably before May, so I just wanted to thank Amanda for all of her work that she's done with the school committee over many years, and also thank you as well for stepping in
No.
at the last minute to help out with school committee. So I wish you guys luck, and thank you very much for working with us.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
See you later.
All right. So that then brings us into new business. The first thing is the Hopkins Lower Middle School project. So I'd like to invite
Good evening, thank you for having me. Jeff D'Amico, project executive from the Vertex Companies, owner's project manager. With me is Rob Blanchard, project executive from Commodore, and Kate and Ricky, the project managers from Commodore, in the audience as well. So we're here tonight to give you an update on the project. We've been very busy over the past couple of weeks since we had our last meeting, so we're going to give you some status updates on where we are. There's a couple of votes we're looking for tonight from the committee. So the agenda we're looking to cover tonight is a vote on some of the proprietary building components, which are things that the school has standardized throughout the district, but because of Mass General Law, we have to vote that in order to make it proprietary. And so I have in your packet the one for Hopkins. Elmwood is the same. I brought both tonight. There's one variant there as it relates to the hardware itself, which I'll get into in a second. And then Bob and I are going to give you an update on the project itself, the work we've been doing over the past few weeks, as well as the cost update. And then I will give you an overview of the total project budget for the number that's going to go to town meeting, and then also give you a view of what that looks like as it gets presented to the public. And then lastly, the plug for the upcoming community forum, which is next Tuesday, April 30th, here, graciously hosted by HCAM, but also available remotely to everybody at home. So please tune in. And then also want to remind the public that town meeting may go multiple nights, so it's not just May 6th you need to turn out for, but potentially May 7th, depending on how.
definitively May 7th.
Definitively May 7th. I'm an optimist, but yes.
Well, for the bulk of for the entirety of the
Yes.
town meeting, yeah.
Okay. So a bit on proprietary items, and so because of Mass General Law, in order for you to not have an open spec, which means you have to provide a minimum of 3 or equals, towns and cities are allowed to determine that certain elements of the building are proprietary because they fit with the overall systems that you've accepted district-wide. And so in order to do that, you need to take periodic votes to reaffirm that. Elmwood and Hopkins are the same here. I'll just flip to the Elmwood for a second to show the items that are both. So in this case, items that are standardized across the district are IT systems hardware. So you want to make sure that your security systems are all in unison in terms of the components that are there for the Genetec video cameras, for the wireless access points, the Aruba switches, which is your brain of your IT room, as well as the Mosaic POS switches, which is your cafeteria equipment in terms of scanning for student lunches, and then the Vivi display manager, so again, back of the house stuff. So that's all stuff we've worked with Ashok and his department to determine these are the standards, and we're looking to reaffirm that for these two upcoming projects. In the case of the lock cores, we've worked with Tim Persons to determine what are the standards across the district, and so this is to make sure that the keys in one building can work in the others with their staff, so they have exterior cores licensed through Medicare systems, and then interior cores through SFIC. And so these are the votes that we've talked about Ashok and Tim with that would be needing for both projects. The difference on Hopkins here is at the top of the screen here, and so because that's an existing building that we're adding to, on that particular building, Tim also wants to keep the hardware, so the door handles themselves, the closing devices. He wants to keep the addition the same as the original building itself, so he added in there the door closers through LCN, exit devices through Von Duprin, and mortise locks of Schlage. And so we're looking to receive votes to you tonight if you're be so willing.
Questions?
My other question was about the door hardware, because we just voted on Tuesday with the ESBC2, the other ones. I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
So thank you for explaining that.
Yeah, just to clarify what that is, with the, for the Elmwood project, the MSBA does not recognize ad hoc committees, so they recognize elected bodies, and so that's why it would have to come before the school committee, or in some cases on a town project, the select board, are the ones that are authorized to make those types of votes.
So we need a motion to approve the list of proprietary items as provided.
That's the,
Yep.
yes.
For the Elmwood and Hopkins projects, would be,
Oh, do we need to say both?
just, if you reference the two schools, that would be,
Okay.
Would be.
would check the box with the MSBA, I'll put it that way.
I move to approve the list of proprietary items as provided in the agenda materials for the Elmwood and Hopkins school projects.
By Elmwood, we mean Charleswood.
Sorry, yeah.
We'll work it out, it'll take a while to work out the lexicon, but yeah.
Okay, so motion by Lori,
Second.
second by Adam. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that's great.
Thanks. Gonna turn over to Bob.
Giving just a project update from the last time that we met. We've done several different projects over at the school. Recently, last week, April vacation, we completed the test pit wells. We drilled about 22 test pit borings. So we just went down to rock. We wanted to verify where the rock was in relation to what the new foundation design is going to be. It just gives us a better idea of the subsurface conditions. So we did the borings. We attended the Conservation Commission meeting 2 weeks ago. That went really well. We have a couple deliverables back on the next Conservation Commission meeting, but everything seems to be going well with the Conservation Commission. Just the other day, we completed the 60% reconciliation on the budget. I think we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. That went really well as well. Both us and PM&C, that's the third-party estimator, are in line with each other on the budget now. I think those are the highlights of the items that we just recently completed.
Yeah, I also want to reference just the planning boards. We had our first planning board hearing as well this past week, and so the permitting process is iterative, so we go before them, we present, we collect their feedback, and then we have to resubmit, as Bob alluded to, so there are follow-up scheduled with both those boards. Bob and his team also, in addition to the borings, did additional due diligence in the building, really trying to, turn over the existing, look behind the mirror, if you will, of the existing building, looking at some of the mechanical equipment and make sure we get the right amount of information on the bid documents. And so there's a lot of that work happening recently. The two estimates that we are going to talk about next are we reconciled both of the designer's estimate, which is PM&C through Perkins, as well as the Commodore team, and they've done their due diligence, and then Vertex, as well as the commissioning agent that you authorized at your last meeting, have also done a drawing review. We've sent all that information back to Perkins so they can incorporate it in the final documents. So we've been very busy over the month of April and churning through a lot of information as we're getting ready to go out to bid at the end of June, which is approaching.
The scanning that we did last week was to finish the balance of the what's called the BIM scanning, or the point cloud survey. So we finished that last week, and then we'll be turning that over to the design team shortly. That's the 3D BIM model that they'll be creating of the existing school.
Any questions on the last month worth of work? Okay. Proceeding on, we want to talk about costs. So I'll first say that the two estimates that were completed, before I get into the slide, this busily colored slide here, the two estimates that were completed were done by both Commodore's team and PM&C. And those estimates are consistent with the estimates that were done back in March. So the good news is we dialed in the scope. This committee gave us the authorization on the value engineering exercises that you've done. Those have been incorporated. We've gone through another round of estimating to really drill down on the numbers and feel comfortable that the number presented last time is in alignment with where we need to be. And so that's the number that we're looking to move forward with. The current estimate is consistent with the estimate that was done a month ago. So what that means to the overall project itself, I wanted to break down for the committee risks, right? Because you're going to appropriate a number at town meeting before we have all the bids in hand. And so it's important to talk about what risks are and what the contingencies are within that number so you understand why we've assembled and recommended this number for you. The color represents the items on top kind of correspond to the contingency number below. So I just wanted to have you follow that visually. And it looks like one got kind of cut off the screen too, which I can, full screen mode. There we go. So the remaining risks in design, and so we're approaching 60% construction document, so we have 2 more months of design. Over that time period, we're going through those 2 parallel permitting processes, so the permitting groups will add items, they always do. There may be some mitigation, there may be some requests that they go through, so there'll be some amount of money that'll be added back to the project for that. The market will tell us what the market bears in terms of bidding conditions, so we carry an escalation factor within the overall construction estimate at the moment. And then additional details and design work. The design isn't done, they're finishing their drawings, they're remembering to add those, dot the i's and cross the t's, and so all that ends up with extra items and extra dollars. And so what we do in green here is a 4% design estimating and escalation contingency. And so that's because we're not totally done with the design, and we've appropriated that into the design and estimating, and then the escalation components itself between now and when the numbers will come back. So all those items in green above reflect in that 4% number below. Now all that will get folded in the final hard bid number that we get this summer, and that gets essentially dissolved within the construction number that you'll approve this summer. The item in blue is that you've chosen to hire a construction manager. They're a partner in the process. They come informed and they have the ability to access dollars within the contract. And so as part of their contract you've already approved, there's a 2.5% contingency within the GMP number. So that's within the cost estimate that's already been established by Commodore. And what that does is it picks up things such as omissions in the drawings that weren't detailed right, but we've talked about and they're generally aware of. Phasing premium, schedule changes, and other things that come up along the way at the discretion of the OPM, the CM, and the working group. We'll work with them to spend that money in the appropriate buckets as we go forward. And so that's within the construction number itself. Outside of the construction number is change order risk. Change orders are related to we're working under existing building. Fortunately, it's a newer building, so there's not a lot of hazmat that you'd find in an older type building. But as we open walls, excuse me, and connect the old to new, there's additional costs that come up, and so there's the ability to have change orders. So that covers unforeseen conditions in the building, and then more so in the site. As Bob alluded to, we're drilling to find where the ledge is, but we're still just taking a kind of peephole into those 15 to 22 locations that Kate referenced. And so it may jump up or down in between those points in time. So there's additional money that may be needed. And so all those yellow items roll up to a 7% change order contingency, and 7% is a number we carry on ad reno projects. If this was a new construction like Elmwood, it would be a lower percentage, such as 5%, because everything's on the paper versus working around the existing conditions. And then lastly, the item at the bottom that's not colored is a 0.6%, so less than 1% for an owner soft cost contingency, which is about $250,000. And that's to pick up any overages in FF&E or technology, or if there are other requests that come in for the consultants to do additional work. And so all that rolls up into your overall escalation buckets and contingencies on the project. Where we are in the overall project with the total project budget, $3 million has been appropriated to date. The construction number was reconfirmed, and it's at $41,435,000 after the VE that you guys accepted, and reflective of the updated numbers that Commodore has provided. The soft cost has remained essentially the same as it was presented to you a few weeks ago, just shy of $8 million. So the total project budget, inclusive of the previously approved $3 million, is $52,400,000. This does not include the relocation of the modulars, which is earmarked at about 1.5 million. That's escalating it out to when we believe that would come back to the project, such as 2027. Those modulars are needed until the end of Elmwood, until Elmwood becomes Charleswood. And so at that point, we envision there'll be surplus funds left over from the Hopkins job that's then completed, and surplus funds left over from the Elmwood project itself. And so potentially at that point, you may go for a town meeting vote to reallocate, those dollars associated with that to then move the modulars over. So I just wanted to be clear on that as we lay that out.
I just want to highlight that because that's been a piece that's been discussed in the community, is that $1.5 million may be added on top of, but the anticipation here is that that money is actually coming out of things that are allocated, so it would not potentially be an additional cost.
That's correct. I mean, with both these projects that are being managed in the town, you appropriate the money at the beginning, right?
Right.
So you've got to go through design, and then we've got to bid it, and then, all things being equal, there'll be plenty of money left over, especially in the Elmwood itself, which, had more capacity from a percentage standpoint, because it's a much larger job. So, we envision that there's more than enough money left in the Elmwood, and the Hopkins will play out the way it is. Hopkins is a more lean budget. We've been conscious through your direction to keep the number tight and to get just the minimal scope that's necessary in order to deliver the extra space in Hopkins. So Elmwood, as a larger project, has more capacity than the Hopkins project itself. And then this is where it, gets confusing, so I tried to break it down for how I envision this being explained to the public at town meeting, and this is just a draft to present to you guys, and certainly here for feedback on it. So I broke this into kind of 3 bullets, and so the total project budget, as you saw on the prior slide, is $52,400,000. So that's being transparent to the public. It's everything we think the Hopkins project is, outside of the modulars that we discussed. And so $3 million has already been appropriated. So the remaining construction phase funds is $49,400,000. So that's the new dollars that essentially we're looking to move forward with from here forward. Of that, last year, $850,000 was approved for mechanical systems upgrades to Hopkins. Now, those are rolled into the overall project. The overall project goes forward. That cost gets handled from Commodore and moving forward. Where it breaks down from there is the $48,550,000, which is the number I talked to you about your last meeting, which is the additional funds needed at this town meeting. And that breaks into 3 buckets. One, there's an earmark for $700,000 for additional mechanical equipment upgrades for Hopkins. And that's been on the books for a while. We've kept that there as an elemental number. Should the Hopkins renovation project not move forward, there's still upgrades that are necessary to the Hopkins school. And so that $850,000 from last year and the $700,000 are items that need to be replaced at Hopkins because they're end of life. If the Hopkins project itself moves forward, as we're discussing tonight, both those elements would be folded into the overall number that is being presented here. So it's all within the number, but there is elements that were earmarked in separate appropriations. The article, Susan, correct me, is it 19 for the project, Hopkins project? Article 19 is the Hopkins School project itself. And so in that article, it would comprise, there's $1,646,000 of reallocation of unissued but authorized debt. So prior projects that were finished under budget, that money's been, collected up and is being put back in front of the town to be reauthorized without a new tax impact. So that's important to the public, that 1.6 million is not an impact to their taxes from a projection. It was already accounted for under prior projects. The new debt request is $46,204,000, and so that would be the new impact that would be affecting a tax impact on the public. And then I do want to note the very important footnote here that doesn't have a number associated with, which is TBD, which is the IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, and the Mass Save. Because you're adding geothermal wells, because you're adding electric systems, and I know you referenced that earlier with the green initiative, we are putting electric replacement equipment in the building itself. You're eligible for rebates. Those rebates may be $1.3 million to $2 million. So of that $46 million, we don't believe the town will ever get to that number because you'll get those rebates. But the reality of that is they're rebates after the fact. So you pay your bills, you open the building, and then you get the check back through the feds. And so towns always borrow on the short-term band and then the long-term borrow. And so, that's where that money then folds back in before you get to the long-term borrowing. So kind of in the band borrowing range. So I know that's a lot of information. You guys are following closely, so you'll understand it more than the public, but we wanted to kind of lay this out logically and explain the kind of steps that have occurred.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
So I have a twofold question. One, can we borrow the guy Bill from last year's presentation to explain all this? Because he was an awesome orator for town meeting. But two, the 700,000 piece, I honestly feel like that's gonna be the most confusing aspect for the public on this, because we're having to vote that separately, right? Like, that's gonna be a separate warrant item.
So the nice thing about it is, wow, that volume's loud.
I know, I keep hearing myself.
The 700,000 is literally the article before. So
Okay.
the 700,000 will pass or not pass, and then Article 19 is Hopkins. So as we're speaking to it, we can reference the funding that was just passed in the previous article.
And so if it doesn't pass, do we have to do an emergency amendment to the next warrant article to like?
If the 700,000 does not pass, then yes, the funding on the floor would have to change.
Now, to clarify, and I know I'm getting out of my depths, but you're gonna modify the number on the floor either way, right? Because right now it's currently listed as 48,550.
I'm checking to see whether or not they updated the warrant. The warrant that I have printed is not the correct numbers. But I don't know what draft version they're at this point in time.
So were articles,
So Article 18 is the 700,000 in HVAC, and Article 19 is Hopkins.
okay,
Are there other elements within 18?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a standalone article.
I mean, we all know, and I will admit this from prior town meetings where I have not been on a board, that most people walk into town meeting not having read the warrants. So the explanation of this has to be exceptionally clear. That's my biggest concern. It's not actually that the town being supportive, it's about them understanding what this all means.
Agreed.
And I almost really wish that we were voting this
school
project
first.
first, because if I'm, when I am a voter, why would I vote to put money in the project where I know I'm gonna be replacing? Like, mentally, you're thinking, why would I vote for the 700 when I know I wanna vote for the school and I'm hoping it passes? It's a bit of an awkward order. We might wanna see if we can switch that.
Well, the public needs to understand that we have gone to town meeting for several years now for these mechanical replacements. It's an end-of-life cycle replacement through all the schools. So we have a 10-year plan that shows the life of every unit within all 5 schools. So there's a cycle, and they've been spread out, because if you look at the building of both Hopkins and the high school, they're both built at the same time. So in terms of a life cycle, you would be replacing all the mechanicals in both Hopkins and the high school at the same time. Not feasible for any community. So we've spread those out through a number of years. So if the life is 30, this one we're stretching to 31, and this one to 32. So this is a request that has come to town meeting for several years in a row.
Right, and I appreciate that, also the explanation for the community, but if I'm voting the school, then I won't have to, it's included. It's, I guess it's,
But that's not how they're doing it, like, they're
Right.
taking it out. So I think that's what you're saying, Susan, is that the number isn't right, because you'd have to take out the 700,000.
We're reducing the amount of debt that you would ask the community for, because 700,000 of the work to be done in the building is part of another article. Way back when we very first started this project, it was not, the original numbers, and Jeff, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the original numbers were not all fully electric for within the building. So because within the building we're at end of life, we started trying to pull in and grab onto the new addition to pull in that green effort within the existing building.
So I think the important thing that we're gonna have to be able to answer, and it's not, I mean, I know Jeff, you already said this, but like, is to explain that that 700,000, regardless of what you vote for the school, is a necessary expense because of the end of the life of these mechanical systems. And so we're asking for this regardless of whether or not we are talking about the school. And that these are the repercussions if you don't vote it. And then when you get to the school element, that we then have to explain that we will be incorporating that work with the new school project. And it's not gonna add more expense to the school project because this has already been voted on separately.
Right.
And so is the money for like the 700,000 come out of a different bucket from the town? Like you were saying, it reduces the debt ask, but so is it because it's under a certain amount that it would come from a different?
It's the way they do their articles,
Yeah.
if you will. So the HVAC replacement was a standalone debt or capital request.
Okay,
Hopkins was a standalone capital request. Now the 700,000, if Hopkins didn't pass, was a gas one-for-one replacement. If Hopkins passes, we can tie into that addition and make it a green replacement. Either way, that replacement within the existing building has to happen.
got it.
Any other questions?
I just had a question on the contingency slide. The 2.5%, is the blue line the place where we would capture, it says schedule requirements, because it is an occupied school and there's a whole lot to be managed around doing this work and having school in session, I don't know, I'm imagining we might end up in like having to make some interventions that we didn't anticipate. That, I guess the 2.5% is the lowest contingency, and I could see us tapping that, if that, the blue is the line item where we would tap something that might be as a result of scheduling and phasing and moving kids or creating recess space, but, you know, what things that we're doing that I know are in the plan. There are probably a few that aren't in the plan, they're gonna come up. And is it in the blue that we'd capture it, and is 2.5% enough? Is really the
So-
question.
The 2.5% is for misses on the job. For, you missed a door, you missed a wall, but we know it's there, that's what the 2.5% covers.
Okay.
We know it's gonna be needed, nobody picked it up, that's what it's gonna be for. If it's a phasing question, if there was enough in contingency, we could use contingency, but we also have the contingencies of the the 7% of unforeseen conditions. Was that what it was? Yeah, 7%.
It's essentially a change order. So, you know, my version of that, and Bob and I will always have a playful conversation on this, is that the CM contingency, although he believes it's, you know, it's in their control, it's in their control at our control as well. So it's within the GMP, they can move it, use it, but they have to get authorization from us to how they spend it down, you know, within certain limits. And so off-hour work, meaning, you know, premium time to have somebody come in on a Saturday to do something because it's MCAS test or whatever like that, you know, that's traditionally how I've used that in cooperation with Bob. And now, as long as he's not at the low end of that 2.5%, there's never been an issue with other CMs working that we use them for those types of things. So, you know, it works for you guys, because that's why Bob's here to deliver the overall project for you, and we'll work around the specifics. Now, if we were to holistically change phasing, then that would be a complete change, and Bob would come to me and say, that comes out of the yellow, Jeff. You know, you've not lived up to how you've described this project in terms of a schedule. You've asked us to make major changes. That should come out of the yellow. The sculpting of the schedule can come out of the blue or yellow.
Okay, that's helpful. So there are two buckets, essentially, if needed, but probably it can be accommodated.
Yes,
Yeah, there's definitely two buckets, and they're very separate.
we'll always fight over that.
All right.
Do we
people
know
feel.
who is presenting this at town meeting?
It's not me. Aye.
This is what you got, right here.
Godspeed. This is just,
We're gonna
it's,
be well
for me,
rehearsed.
it's not like you've done it before, it's just that there's like a core group of people in the town that are paying attention and that will walk in and like know what this all means. And then you have the other 300 people, if we're lucky, I guess, to get that.
There were 600 at the last one.
I know. And it's not to the fault of those people. It's just, you know, it's busy and trying to keep up with everything that's happening is a lot. But I'm just worried about the complication of it all and explaining, because it's very different than a new school project. And we haven't done like hybrid like this in a long time that I'm aware of. So I just think that part of it is gonna make it.
Almost like, seems like they might have to actually present with what is going to occur. That if people haven't been paying attention, that they're gonna take Hopkins and add on to it, and when it's.
Oh, yeah, I mean, that's all part of it anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, you probably have to get very, like, detailed to the point where people that have been at all of your public forums will be like, yeah, we already talked about all this, so, but, okay. I mean, however I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to, but it's a little bit daunting, I think.
All right.
Yeah, well, we may get a bite of the apple at EHOP. Give us a chance to show it once.
Oh, that's true, that's true.
And hoping for good engagement.
On the
at the
30th.
Forum on the 30th.
Yeah.
Is there somebody who would like to make a motion? Or did anybody have a question? I don't want to cut anybody off.
Just one more question on the 700,000. That will be if the other article, 18, would be not a green solution. It would just be replacing in kind, basically, what we already have in the building.
The 700 could be either or. So the 700, right now, the target is to tie in and be 100% green.
I mean, if this doesn't pass.
If this doesn't
It'll
pass,
be-
we have no option other than to.
Do gas.
1 for 1.
Correct. So, but if it passes, the added benefit is that we can extend our green profile.
Correct.
I'm not entirely sure what the motion is, Nancy, so we might need some help there.
So the motion is to accept the design development submission and funding ask.
So to be clear, just at Laurie's point, just so you have the right number, you know, the construction phase number is 49,400,000. So that's the budget that it would take to finish the overall project. Now, it breaks down to these various funding sources, and so I don't want to advise you on how to take your vote, but the $3 million is already appropriated. 49.4 million is what it takes to finish the overall project, and then there's all the fun confusion
Yeah,
we
it's
just talked
like-
about and how we fund that.
How you're paying for it doesn't matter, it's just what you're asking for.
I think you guys should authorize the 49.4 because that's the total budget that you're asking this team to deliver for you, and then how it gets funded as shakes out the way it shakes out.
Is that,
We don't have to vote the number that goes on the warrant. I mean, no, there's a number there right now, but at town meeting, the number that goes to vote, we don't have to have voted that number.
So you will vote the total construction budget, the 49,400, as Jeff said. Keep in mind that any time we ask for a capital project, it's up to the town as to how they put it through as funding, whether it's a pay-as-you-go, whether it's debt. In this case, I had put forward all the projects that are closing, with a balance in the appropriation. So it's their choice to, reallocate that debt. So all those little nuances really come dictated from the town. So as long as you vote the total project budget, the town determines the actual funding of it.
And I have.
Does that make sense?
It makes sense. the 49.4 is a much bigger number than 46.2. And so I think in terms of we know that we're gonna get to 48.5 because the 850 is already there. So I think it's hard, again, another nuance for the community to understand that we are saying it's gonna be 49.4, but because of many factors, you know, including the conservative management of the funds that we do and the way we've been able to manage our building projects, money that the schools had asked for in the past it's not that it's school money, it's all town money and taxpayer money, but money that we've asked for can offset this cost. And I think it's not always visible to the community that the school is managing the funds so tightly and managing these projects to a positive, favorable outcome. So, you know, somehow I just want to make sure we get that across when we're doing the presentation or the forums, that, you know, the 850 is there. Like, I feel like it was allocated to a school project and we are reallocating it to a school. We would like to reallocate it to a school project. I wish we could have more say in that, but apparently we can't. But making it clear that it is already there.
Well, the 850 you voted last year as HVAC replacements for Hopkins.
Yeah.
We just didn't move on it because we were in this process, so it didn't make sense to move forward and start plopping in.
So I'd like to ask for the 49.4 minus 850 because we have, you know, do we have to ask for the 49.4?
Because we've already allocated 850?
Yeah, I think her point is, like, if
So
we were
you would
asking
rather
for the total-
vote the 48,550?
I would.
Because I think, like, and I hear what you're saying, is that really, the total project budget is 52.4. Or 50,
Yes.
52.4.
If you're
We're not
not
asking
voting
for
the
that
3
because
million.
the 3 million's already been appropriated, so if we've already appropriated the 850, why can't we ask for it?
Right.
And that's fine as well. You can do it that way.
I'd rather do the 48,550.
Would you like to make a motion to that effect? Go ahead,
I'd like
Adam.
to move that we accept the design development submission and funding ask of $48,550,000.
Thank you. Motion by Adam. Is there a second on that?
I'll second.
Second by Susan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you guys for coming out.
Slide more for those viewers at home, but stay tuned. April 30th, here at HCAM, 6 p.m., also available remote for everybody to participate, and then the 2 dates for town meeting. And then just a reminder, everybody watching at home, HCAM graciously hosts all these prior presentations as well as your meetings, and then the project website, and then we have a link to the project website too, where all those things are also posted. And so this slideshow will go up on the website today, and we'll get more hits on that.
Fabulous.
Thank you for your time, Steve.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, have a good night.
Susan, do you know how many articles there are on the total?
56?
Really?
Feels like a three-nighter.
Yeah, that's not
your hard
sounding like a
copy?
two-nighter.
Well, there's a special town meeting
Within the town
Tuesday.
meeting.
52.
Wait,
Is that the special town meeting?
Oh, yeah, that doesn't, no, it's more than that, it's like, I think
There are
there's.
4 on the special, I
Is it
think.
only 4?
I think it's only 4.
wait,
Okay,
when-
so 56.
It's stuff that didn't make the deadlines. They called for a special town meeting within the town meeting. But when they open it for one thing, it's open for,
I really wish that they brought food trucks to the town meeting.
that would be very fun.
But you're not allowed to have
nobody
food in
be
the
inside.
cafeteria, nor are you allowed water.
Just happy this year it doesn't fall on my birthday, because it's happened many times.
All right, so we're gonna move into the superintendent's end of cycle summative report. In terms of our piece of this,
Do you want to do paraprofessionals?
did I?
Oh, yeah, we have Abby's. Do we have her first, or me?
Yes.
Do you have this?
Yeah, paraprofessional request.
At 8:15?
I
Do not, I have,
Well, that's interesting that you don't have that.
Are you on the revised?
no, apparently I
That's
have
why
not.
when we were talking about things that pop onto the agenda
They-
at
they-
the very
yes,
last
At
minute,
the very last minute, yes.
this is a perfect example.
I think
Okay, so,
we're on to the paraprofessional B request for Elmwood School.
I'm glad you
and
said
that's the only
that. I had the wrong one open.
welcome. I apologize.
That's okay. Good evening.
I thought you were just interested in everything.
Couldn't you tell she was just fascinated?
Well, I know she watches,
Mesmerized.
she watches from home.
So I'll be brief. I know you have a big agenda tonight. So I have shared a memo to you detailing a specific ask of an increase of a paraprofessional category B located at the Elmwood Elementary School for the remainder of this year and to continue into next year. I'd be happy to answer any specific questions you might have, but broadly speaking, this request comes from the principal and folks at Elmwood, and it's related to 3 really interesting drivers that I just wanted to highlight for you tonight, and then I'm available if you have any questions. So if you look at the year-over-year growth in Elmwood since September, there have been 9 students who moved into the district since the school year started with IEPs from other communities. And that's an important feature to understand because many times the structures in other communities don't match Hopkinton's, given some of the uniqueness here. Additionally, 6 more students who were not categorized as move-ins have been found eligible for special education year over year, which is a net growth. And that's an important dynamic that we see post-COVID, specifically for students in 2nd and 3rd grade. And then finally, we seem to just be emerging into a pattern where we have more students who are coming up earlier with IEPs. And that's an important positive development, and we see that also as an echo of the dyslexia regulation, which asked for earlier screening and finding. So those 3 things kind of come together, and what you get is that at this moment at Elmwood, it's the only location we have where our numbers are actually higher at this time of the year than they were a year ago. And I think that's really important. We can also look into the future by checking out what's happening today at Marathon, and we can see that this trend is consistent, so we know that it will carry through till next year. So with that, we're requesting an addition of a 1.0 paraprofessional B, and Susan and I have had creative conversations about how to manage that increase, and we feel comfortable that we are able to do that.
Other questions?
I have just a couple questions. Thank you for that, the memo and that context. The earlier intervention, which I think I am not a paraprofessional or a special education professional, but I would think that would benefit everybody, getting it to the kids earlier in their career. Do you anticipate needs sort of easing in the upper grades at some point where we could reallocate potentially some maybe grade 4 or 5 paraprofessionals down to grade 4 will move eventually anyway, but what do you see
So-
upstream?
I think that my perspective is that true growth is growth, right? And so as the net number is increasing, you're seeing growth in ways that aren't reallocatable as the response. And I, am very thoughtful about any request to increase mid-year, and I think that what I would say is this is reflective of true growth in the denominator of the fraction as well as the needs. And that is a trend I think will continue from what I've observed, in the community.
Okay, thank you. And the only other question I had was, I'm not familiar with this, so just if you help me understand, when we have a move-in with an IEP, as you mentioned, structured to the sending district, and we have a co-teaching model, we have a different kind of philosophy maybe or structure of how we deliver, do the IEPs at some point in that year get reevaluated? And are you seeing, more need, how does that work?
Sure. So one of the reasons we're coming to you in April is because month after month, all of that process has been happening, right? But people move in across the year, and those processes take often quite a while. It's important to know that parents maintain the right to all of the exact services that are articulated in the way they're articulated on the sending IEP.
Is that the state put?
And what we would argue is it's a tough way to start out trust building with people to be like, oh, let's restructure that for you, right?
Right.
So what we really try to do, and this is the common practice, is you match it to the best ability you have. So you can honestly say, you know, we've done our best job to do that. And then let's get to know you over 2, 3, 4, 5 months. And let's see how your student has adjusted to a new school system. And then we meet again, and then we revise and we issue what we would call a localized IEP. But people still maintain a right to that previous document written by people who knew their child very well. And you can also argue that when you move, sometimes the last thing you want to do is change your child's core special education services. So there's many good reasons why people would hold on. And we want to work collaboratively to let people make those changes when they feel ready. So it isn't always easy, and it isn't always consistent either.
It's helpful just to understand that, you know, here we are almost in May, and understanding that I can see where you can get into the year and the need can emerge. And I would assume many thanks to the paraprofessionals who've probably been working really hard to address this growth. So thank you for that.
Of course, and I did want to thank everybody at Elmwood who does a lovely, lovely job of adjusting flexibly and kindly and professionally all the way through. And when they start signaling that it's time to make an adjustment, I take that very seriously.
Couple things. One is I am excited to hear that the intervention's starting earlier and that the dyslexia screening seems to be having a positive impact on kids' lives. Question I have is, I know you had referenced the funding source having been identified, so more for Susan, I'm assuming the funding for this year is not, it's a much smaller amount because it's only for a couple of months. What is the funding source for next year?
We're gonna look to use the IDEA 240 grant.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's an appropriate use.
That's great. All right. Any other questions regarding this? Also want to say, I know that you work hard to get the budget as far in advance as you can, but I also do appreciate when you bring things back mid-year that need to be addressed in the moment, so.
Thank you, and I think it's a true example of kind of the transparency and the iterativeness of the special education budget. And hopefully the memo is helpful to give you some context.
Thank you.
Is there a chance that you'll be able to hire someone this late in the year?
Well, we're terrific, so we're gonna try very hard, right? Like, it's a great place to work. It's a lovely building with great kids and staff, and so we'll do our best. And sometimes people are in flux this time of year. They might have just graduated, they might have just gotten their license, so we might be lucky, yeah.
All right. Is there somebody who would like to make a motion?
Move to approve additional B paraprofessional for Elmwood School for the remainder of the 2023-2024 school year and fiscal year 25.
Motion by Amanda, is there a second by Adam? All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous and approved. Thank you very much for.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you for waiting so patiently.
All right, so that then moves us into the superintendent's end of cycle report. In terms of the form that we use, and just for people that may want to keep this in mind as she's going through the presentation, Georgette did send that out. I appreciate your prompt to make sure that I did not.
I just was confused as to whether we were doing that for today, and then I thought I was behind.
No, you're not behind. So just in terms of process, I think it's good to have that just to be able to consider as she's going through the presentation, because it does impact how the form is filled out. And it kind of helps make sense of the goals and the indicators piece. We're not filling it out tonight, but between now and the next meeting, everybody individually will put together like both ratings and then comments, and then we'll discuss it here at the table. in the super awkward, like, talking about Dr. Kavanaugh in the third person kind of way. And then at the following meeting, we will have actually put it together in one document and figure out where the ratings and things are next week, so that it should be a smooth meeting for the final one, and then we'll vote it at that point in one document. But all of our work that we do individually also becomes part of the public record. But the one evaluation that is the evaluation is the one that the 5 of us will vote on.
So we have the, like, kind of group meeting, special meeting about it on the 2nd, and then the final meeting on it is the 16th?
I believe that's the right date.
Okay.
Yes, because the following week is town meeting.
But for next Thursday, we want to come with our own point of view on all the ratings, with comments, if possible.
And typically what we've done in the past is that then people can have after we've had the conversation, if you want to give thought to some of the conversation, just to get them to me by the end of the weekend, so that I can then merge it into one cohesive document, and we can then get it back out for people to consider before we bring it to the meeting. Although we will have an extra week, I guess, because of the town meeting.
Okay.
We can discuss timeline. All right.
Okay. So you'll be looking at 2 documents tonight. One of them covers my goals. The other one will cover all of the indicators that we had selected way back at the end of the summer for me to work on during this year. So this will take some time. I have shared both of these documents with you, and you don't have to open them up now. If it's easier for you to do that, then you can certainly follow along that way. It will be very difficult to read them on that screen because a lot of the print is super small. But between now and the next time we're together, you'll see in those documents there are loads of clickable links. I won't click on them all tonight, but you will have a chance to kind of go through and look at all of the supporting documents. If in that process, as you're doing that from one week to the next, you think, I wonder about, and you have a question about a document, or there's something that you say, do you have evidence for, or could you help me better understand, I am absolutely available to do that. So this is just a compilation of some of those things, and some of the things that you see are going to be nothing more than just one example of, and there may be many, many more contained electronically somewhere in the world. So my first goal for the 22-23 school year was back in the 2022-23 school year. I started out with a math student growth and achievement goal. And you just saw all of that come to fruition just recently when we talked about how we were going to schedule the math kids at the middle school, specifically in grade 6. But way back in the summer when I was looking at this, I said, after 1 year of work on math, we are not done. And so we need another year to continue to work on this, to mine the data, to think about the way teaching and learning is happening in those classrooms, hence this goal. So I did put together a math instructional team. There are loads of people who are on that, all of the directors, some building principals, the assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction, secondary leadership team members. Abby Hanscom was there, the new 6 to 12 director was there. And you'll be able to click through some of these things, but we went to the Hopkins School and we did some observation of instruction in grade 5 to see how things were differentiated. We did case study research with 4 students. We reviewed a lot of the MCAS data, especially in relation to our subgroups. We did item analysis work. We prepped a grade 6 math survey that went out to teachers, to families, and to kids. And, oops, hold on. We have done obviously all of the STAR and MCAS data stuff, and all of that has been analyzed from K to 5 and 9 to 12. If you click on this link here, you'll be able to see the 9 to 12 analysis of the MCAS data, but we do have that for all grades. There will be some places where you don't get to see data because it has student names in it and would obviously violate student privacy. We continue to monitor all of our K to 5 guaranteed and viable curriculum to make sure that it's effective in meeting all of the kids' needs. That was something that we started with, and I think that you saw by the time we came to the end that we realized there was a subgroup of kids whose needs were not being met as fully as they might be. Shelley Moran, our K-5 person, now has Number Corner in all of our K-2 classrooms. We have Beast Academy in grades 2 to 5, and that's an enrichment product. So kids who are really jazzed about math can engage in that. We'll show you a couple of things that just might be of interest to you. So she has put together what she's calling a curriculum container. If it happens to be green, it's something that is non-negotiable. It happens at every grade level. If it's pink, it's something that's an enrichment, and you can see the grade levels at which those things are happening. The other thing that I thought was kind of neat that she has done here is she is looking at the impact of something like Number Corner. So we started doing that work here in 22-23, and you can see the fall to winter SGP score for our grade 1 students was a 57. We like it to be above the 50th percentile. When those first graders moved to second grade, so the work is continuing, I think that the foundation that we're putting together in that math is really helpful, because these same students had a 67 SGP. And this year in 23-24, when our kids went, our grade 1 kids went from fall to winter, you can see that they all had a 65. So what we're hoping is that these things that used to be 55, 58, 56, 57 will start to look like this because of the work that we're doing with Number Corner, and that will be interesting to follow through. And then finally, there's the link here for the presentation that I made to the committee about the changes in math instruction. It's just a picture of our kids doing Number Corner. So the second goal, because the 2023 MCAS data hadn't yet been released, I wanted to continue to disaggregate the data by subgroups in ELA as well. And specifically, I wanted to take a look at our writing curriculum instruction and assessment, most notably at the secondary levels, but we've also been looking at it K-5. So one of the things that we are seeing when we take a look at those subgroups is that our special education students in ELA, we have not seen that bounce back from the pandemic. And we really feel like we need to do that, and we are wondering if some of that has to do with, first of all, our writing instruction. We very frequently use writing in what I would call the service of reading, which means that kids are not just writing, but they are writing about things that they have read, things that they have seen, anything that we would consider to be text. And so they are mining those texts to take information out and then to start making meaning of that information. When we've done some of our MCAS deep dives, what we see too is even if it says that it's a reading standard, if it says analyze, our kids don't fare as well as if it's a language standard or if it's just a basic reading comprehension. So it's drawing inferences and making meaning in the reading and then writing about those things that we think are places where we could grow our repertoire. To that end, down here in number 6, I now have an ELA group. We started meeting just yesterday for the first time, but we're going to do the same thing the math people did, just do that really big data dive. And we're able to also look at student work, because anything kids write on those MCAS tests or any of the in-class writing that they do, we have access to all of those student writing samples. Much of this is stuff that you saw when I had presented to you in January. I've been meeting with the high school SMLs, middle school PLCs in content areas. Jeff has been doing that work. And we've done all kinds of presentations, especially on disciplinary literacy. Here you'll be able to see a very recent presentation to the middle school faculty on disciplinary literacy. And you know, disciplinary literacy lives in both the high school and middle school improvement plans. My third goal was a student achievement goal, and it was focused on co-teaching models as they applied to the middle school. This came about after the release of the Athena report. Our Nicole Murray has done something very interesting here. She's got a math learning matrix and an ELA language-based matrix. What I really like about this is last year you'll remember that I was doing a lot of work in cohorting kids and putting them into classrooms so that we would be able to maximize targeted instruction because kids of very like learning profiles lived together under one roof. So now that we have this matrix, it seems like it's a very easy thing for our people to internalize at the middle school level, for example, and they are able to take a look at this and think about where a kid lives in terms of language-based skills. So I'm thrilled to have that in ELA, and I'm also thrilled to have that in math. So Nicole has taken over a lot of that work. She does that work with Beth Callahan, who's the K-5 person, because Beth obviously knows those learners quite well. And naturally, we have the middle school guidance faculty and middle school administration working on that. When we talk about those classrooms in the co-teaching model, it is a very slow going. I know that you note that at the end of last school year, we brought in someone who did a really nice presentation for us on co-teaching and how to streamline that process. In here, I've added something that is an indicator of what are those 6 co-teaching models, because we talk about them all the time. I'm not sure that committee members always know what they are. So when you take a look at those, you'll be able to see that when I say we're still using a lot of one teach, one drift, that's one of those models where you have a teacher at front who's delivering the information and somebody else kind of walks around and just coaches a kid up sort of in real time. We see that predominantly, and we want to start seeing a balance of all of those pieces. So still, this is something that I will be working on with Nicole Murray and with Abby as well. We now have a provider who will work on differentiation as it applies to math. So that person is a person who has a PhD in this particular topic from WPI, and so she does this work with a lot of school districts. So she'll be coming in over the course of the entire year, just sort of in a spiraling kind of fashion, to keep working and observing and working and observing. And Nicole will obviously be doing the co-teaching piece of that. We've done a lot of ELA, a lot of math walkthroughs. These once monthly math, ELA and math walkthroughs have happened on these dates. And
What occurs on a math walkthrough?
oh, that's super interesting. So we just go into maybe 4 different classrooms that are predetermined, and they are typically co-taught classrooms, and we just observe what the instruction looks like. And there are typically 4 or 5 of us who will go into each one of those rooms. I know it's got to be.
Not much pressure or anything.
No, it's interesting for the kids too, because I'm sure they're thinking, why are all those people here?
Yeah.
And then afterward, we just do a debrief of some of the things that we saw. And really, to our teachers' credit, we do see a lot of strength in teaching. It is nice to see that. So placement this year will also happen, I think I've already said this, with help from the grade 5 teachers. And a lot of our kids' growth and achievement, it's living in spreadsheets. And you got to see, I think, some of the more aggregated stuff when we were looking at the math. But if you were also able to see the ones where you actually break down like names and kids, it's very interesting data. All right, so this is the goal that is also a carryover. This is kind of that weaving of the DEI and the social justice and the SEL and all of that stuff coming together. I know that when I've spoken about it before, we've got people who are working in different buckets: special education, social emotional learning, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And now it's sort of this way of not looking at those things in isolation. And all of those things live in our school improvement plans. But you can kind of see some of the things that we've done through the course of the year. We took the findings from Black Print and we looked at having Matthew Rodriguez and Karen White both come in and talk with faculty, talk with the administrative team. We had spent some time with our Sikh religious leaders in the development of the Kirpan policy. This is actually pretty great. I have to just stop and tell you this. So today I was in the grade 6 classrooms at the middle school, and a kid came out and he said, "Hey, you're that lady. I've seen you on TV." And I said, "Oh, do you watch school committee meetings?" He said, "Only for the Kirpan policy." Oh, that was great. Yeah, I thought that was really nice. Anyway, we have lots of plans in place to continue to grow our CPAC and LPAC relationships. There have been some superintendent reports where we've talked about those things. I want to have a little shout out to Jen Suker. This is the first year that she has ever done this, but she put together a day for anybody who is an LPAC parent to come to Hopkinton High School for a few hours. You could drop in. There were all kinds of booths set up, like what does it mean when your child takes an MCAS test? You know, how does your kid actually like buy lunch in the cafeteria, and what does that mean that lunch is free? And I mean, there were people from every walk of the Hopkinton Public Schools schools' lives there to meet with parents. And the turnout, I had first wondered, would there be about 3 people who came to this? The turnout was amazing. It was steady all day for the time that they were there. Yes, and they got to, really have time, I think, with different groups of people who could help them with things they really struggled to understand.
What do you call that in this list? Is that listed on here?
Where is she? She's in here somewhere. If she's, oh, I know why she's not here, because I had to use 2 pages on this one. Yeah, here's her educational workshop.
I thought it was just my eyes.
I know.
Yeah, no, sorry, that was her flyer that she had sent out. So it was on February 16th, 9 to 11 in the high school library, and the turnout was super. All right, yeah, there were so many things to this one, I had to go on to another slide. Let's see where I was. There is currently a DEI team at Marathon, that's brand spanking new. I think Elmwood's had one for a very long time. We have not only had presentations made by our friends at Legacy Farms, they've come in to talk with our high school and middle school educators about what does it mean to be kind of this sort of newcomer or cultural other in this community, and how do you help to understand how our culture influences the ways in which kids access curriculum. But we also just recently had the Chinese Hopkins Chinese American Association come in, the HCAA, and they also did a presentation for us, which I've shared for you here. The SEL director has been working with our teachers and counselors to make sure that the HSA has been administered, and in fact, it has been. We currently have an audit of SEL practices going on. There's a team here from EduSolve, and they're here taking a look at, they're doing classroom walkthroughs in all 5 buildings. They've managed to get into probably 25 classrooms in these sort of 10-minute hits. And we all go in, there's a group of us, and you just keep putting ratings in. And they'll take that qualitative data and do a little bit of research with it, but they also have our vocal data, they have our HSA data, and they have the student responses to the climate team data. So they will produce a report for us about what does SEL look like and how is it thriving and where might you grow your programming.
Is that grant funded?
It was grant
grant
funded.
funded, right.
We had not planned this when I was doing this work, and then because we had another SEL grant, the state contacted us and said, you have an option to take another $14,000. And we said, if we can do this work, why wouldn't we look at, some of our gaps and holes and see where that went? So again, hats off to Carla Burley, who's put this together. And so far, we've done 4 schools. The high school is the last one tomorrow morning, and it's gone swimmingly well. We've done a lot of professional learning on culturally proficient teaching practices. So when you click on this, you'll be able to see that. You'll also be able to see some of these things, I think, in the indicators. And there's a PD presentation that were made by 4 directors and me on November 7th, which was the Professional Learning Day. We had a lot of the elementary ELA folks, and we were thinking about cultural proficiency and the CRI-OP and how those things weave together. And remember, the purpose of this is to really bring all these pieces together and see how they are working. Last summer, Jeff Lebrod and one of the folks from Black Print, Jen Suker, and I did a presentation at the MASS Summer Conference. We still have our trial program going on between Yale University and the Elmwood School. This is year 3, so it will discontinue after this year. Yale University comes in, observes the teachers, takes data, gives them feedback, and I just want to thank the teachers for signing on to this. They have been amazing, and Yale is giving us big kudos. Restorative practices, what Carla has started to do is use some of that grant money to pay teachers on off time. So because we're so limited in the time that we can offer people professional learning. So even over April vacation, we had a group of teachers who came in and did 2 days of RJ, which is really amazing that we're getting all of our people trained in restorative justice practices, and we're doing it in clever ways, and we're not having to fund that ourselves because it's come to us through grant work. There's Jen's educational workshop that we just talked about. And we continue to strive to diversify our workforce. It's really hard to do that, as you know. But I thought I would include for you some of the DESE data that shows 2014 to 2024. One of the problems is that when it says staffing, it means everybody in our school district. So this is never going to break that down for you to say, who is an administrator, who is an administrative assistant, who's a teacher, who's a paraprofessional, who's a custodian. But these are the ways in which the numbers are changing, and you can see that the numbers are changing ever so slightly. For example, we had one person in our district who self-identified as African American, and now they're 8.2. 4 who identified as Asian, now 24.5. Hispanic, 2.8. Went to 11. So it really is a slow crawl to increase the diversity, but in some ways it's happening.
Do you find you're getting a more diverse population applying for jobs?
Just a little bit. I can't really say that it's enormously different. And we now advertise in different places, and Kim Polnick and Emily Brown have been going off to job fairs.
Yeah, I was wondering
And
about
so,
that,
yeah, and so sometimes it helps to meet a person in person. And then if they've already applied to a job with us, we don't take their resume because we would have it. But when they just came back, they had about, 15 additional resumes for teaching positions, which was really nice. So it gives us an opportunity to meet sort of candidates in the wild, so to speak.
Do they go to job fairs just within Massachusetts?
Mostly in Massachusetts, yes, yeah. It's nice when you have kids who are just leaving college. There's not a lot of diversity coming out of teacher preparation programs. Kim had gone to a DESE-sponsored professional learning opportunity, and they say, we are willing to admit that we don't have a lot of people who are like non-white candidates coming out of teacher preparation programs. And a lot of times, people like to live near people who look like them and think like them. And so, if Hopkinton continues to diversify the way it is, it's not surprising that our Asian population has grown more so than many of the other populations that, are on that list. One of the things I have seen in other communities that have diversified just a little before we did, you do start to have more Asian faculty in your schools. All right, the fifth goal is to continue to address enrollment growth and then ultimately building youth and expansion throughout the district. I won't spend a lot of time on this one because I think of all the goals, this is the one you see all the time. You see all of the presentations like you saw tonight. You see me talking about the enrollment updates. We take a look at what those buildings are going to look like. So for example, way back in July of 2023, we had a meeting with folks from Hopkins to say, my gosh, what would this thing look like if you turned into a 5-6 school? What would be the hopes and dreams, or what would that look like? And so some of these things will just sort of help you take a look at how this thing has evolved throughout the school year. Things like press releases, sample presentations made at Hop, all the way to our May 6th annual town meeting presentation that we have pretty much sealed up right now, we like to think. In Goal 6, this came about from an indicator that I had chosen last year. The focus of the goal was really to think about the Hopkinton experience and what do our offerings look like alongside the way students experience those offerings. So we engaged with Dr. Judy Martin. She had done this work in a previous district where I had worked. And so she has been in communication with the class of 2023. So now that they are 1 year out of school, she has a survey that she's going to be sending to them. Like, what was your experience post-graduation? How well did we prepare you? And this is a very lengthy survey. And because it's a lengthy survey and we ask them about a lot of things, and if it's a survey that will advance. So if we say, did you attend college when you left Hopkinton High School? And you say yes, and then we say, did you change colleges? There might be a whole bunch of questions that you skip to something else. So it won't be the same survey for all people because the experiences are different. But because it's a good commitment to do this survey, it will take our kids like maybe 15, 20 minutes to go through all of those questions.
Is it a computerized survey, I take it?
It is, yes. HPTO has been super generous, and they have purchased for us 10 $50 gift cards. So if you do it, you have a chance of winning a $50 Amazon card, and those names will be sort of chosen at random. We had the Promoting Good report. I had done some work with 2 non-college track students who were willing to be interviewed by me on the way, and I was really happy to be able to talk to them a few times. I think the one thing that I derive, and you'll see this in the indicators as well, one of those people is just traveling now, and another one of those people is in the workforce. But the one consistent thing that they would both tell me is that because they knew they were not choosing that very traditional Hopkinton High School college track, they had the identity of, I feel a little bit like an outlier here. Like it wasn't impossible to fit into the fabric of the building, but you knew that you were different for that kind of purpose. You can see the district-wide climate team that we had, and you can see the rolling agenda. And the climate team, when we started, was really to think about assessing the morale in our schools. I think we've taken it even further than that, but you got to see a little bit of those slides from the survey. And hopefully this
Did you share those slides with us?
yes, they're in here somewhere.
Okay.
Yep, they are. Or if they're not in here, Susan, they're in the indicators.
Okay.
So you'll be able to go back and look at those as well. I think I shared the long one and the short one. So there's one that has about 137 pie charts, and then there's one that only has about 7 that I shared with you last time, so you'll be able to see both. Reviewing the civics curriculum, we thought that that might be really important to see the kind of experience, because what we really hope is that when our kids leave, they know how to be sort of good citizens, and we're not sure the degree to which our kids do that. We know that they leave with a lot of knowledge and a lot of ability to navigate things, but their citizenship we're not quite as sure about. So that's something that Mr. Lebrad has sort of taken the lead on, is looking at that piece. And then we went with the 360-degree assessment and the district climate work. I sent out a request for people to participate, and we had some teachers and all of the administrators who didn't really have as much option as the teachers did to participate. We had the first meeting welcome. You can see again the rolling agenda. We had some low-hanging fruit, so we're talking about things that we're already doing in our buildings that seem to be boosting morale. We did a 360-degree survey for review, and the admin team did this, so you can sort of see the results of that. The first draft I had attached to you. We went back and looked at it again, and we have agreed that we're going to spend some time with that when we do our admin retreat over the summer. You did get to see the results of the survey here, and here are the 2 different surveys, the long one and the short one, that you would be able to see. I did not do a public presentation on the data from the 360-degree survey that was filled out by all the
What's a
admin.
360-degree survey?
Interestingly, DESE has one, and it asks you about sort of every single facet of running a public school district. So there are questions about budget, there are questions about climate, there are questions about academics, there are questions about special education. All of those things land in that survey.
Okay.
All right, so that's it with this. These are all the goals.
Could I ask you a goals question?
Sure, yeah.
In the past couple of years, there have occasionally been goals that were not really achievable. They were really a 2-year goal. They became 2-year goals, or they were, in the mid-year, we adjusted to a 2-year goal.
Yes.
Do you feel that everything here at this point is kind of wrapped up, and next year you're going to start fresh? Or any of these, are you asking or considering extending them?
That ELA goal, I'm hanging on to that. And even if you say, I don't really want to see that again, that's okay, I'm still doing that. That's fascinating work to me, and I think that is, when we, in the superintendent's report tonight, when you get to see our scores, and we have 75% of our grade 3 to 8 kids who are meeting or exceeding expectations. On a statewide level, that's great. But I have sort of hopes that we can keep all of our teachers and all of our administrators and everyone really focused on that kind of literacy learning, because the research that comes out of it continues to evolve like crazy. And the more we know, the better we can do.
Okay, so I had a hard time with this when I had to do it before, so now I'm like struggling again because I'm trying to understand how we take your goals presentation, the rubric indicators, and where that all fits into the actual evaluation form. Because I'm not entirely seeing how they match up, and it's likely user error, not actual anyone else's error. So I'm like, the form that we have to work with has 4 different sections based on like, you know, the community outreach, your curriculum work, which I can see parts of that in each of the goals. So is that what we're supposed to parse and parcel out for the?
Those 4 standards you're talking about, the indicators fall under the 4 standards. So there are 2 goals, and then, well, sometimes there are 2 goals. I have a lot of goals. So those goals are there, but they are separate from those 4 standards that you're looking at.
Okay.
When you take a look at an individual goal, for example, so let's say we go with the math goal, you would ask yourself the question, based on the evidence that Dr. Kavanaugh provided to me, did she exceed the standard, meet the standard, partially meet the standard, or not meet the standard? And you'd have to make sort of your own judgment about that based on all of the evidence presented in the goals document. Then when you look at these indicators, we chose specific ones that might say, how well does Dr. Kavanaugh communicate with the community, for example? And then you'd have to make a decision about the degree to which I have met or not met that indicator.
I'm still confused.
So it,
But I mean, it's not hard to see the breadth of work. I'm more looking at the form and
Yep.
saying like if I was looking at each of your goals and evaluating on my, like on the goal, it's really clear. But then taking it to that form is where I always am like, ah. So I apologize because I don't want to, it's late and I don't want to keep us lengthy. And if it's one of those things where I just need to like sit and talk to somebody individually and figure it out, then I can do that. But like that form itself is where I'm struggling.
so I want to be tread carefully, but do you think Georgette could put the goals and indicators just on the blank form to make it, do you know what I mean?
Well,
I've
it's
done
funny
in
that
the
you say
past.
that because that's what I was thinking.
Okay.
I was like, if it
Yep.
came with that in there, then I would
Then
know
it
what we
is
were.
more- And I have done that in the past, I just don't know that I'm going to get to it before the
Sure.
weekend.
Yeah, we can.
And her formatting on the document itself is better than mine. It's actually the bigger issue, that it,
And I was just gonna say, I think, and I don't know that I'm an expert in this, I would say I'm not, but the
well, you did
indicator.
the research on it up front.
Well, yeah, this is a while ago now,
Yeah.
but I think that the indicators, if you look through them, the superintendent has a big job with a lot of facets, and the indicators are professional qualifications of a superintendent, and period. And then each year, we sort of highlight a few that we specifically want to evaluate on. All of them, in some capacity, are being addressed by a superintendent at all times. I mean, all the indicators are kind of in play when you are a superintendent, but we've picked some number to say, in observing the outcomes and the work that Carol has done this year, for these indicators that we're focused on, because we think these in particular are very critical to the success of where our district is right now, how is she doing on those specific indicators? Some of those enable the goals. Some of them are, it's just a focus of indicators. There is some relation, but not necessarily.
Right, and I just think as someone coming in mid-year, it's difficult for me. Like, I think if like they were marked, which ones are
Yep.
the focus indicators, it would just be easier to understand.
Yes.
And to have the goals put in what the goals
Yeah.
are so that our numbers line up when we're having the conversation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Right.
We always paste them in ourselves,
Yeah,
and it's like,
yeah.
oh, I had that as number 3, oh, I had that as number, yeah.
Right.
So I think that's,
Okay. Thank you,
we can do
because
that.
I think
Sure.
that was what I was missing, and if
Yep.
that
Which
was added,
indicators
it would make a
Yeah,
lot more
it then does make it much clearer, and at the next meeting, we'll have a lot of conversation, right? Your form doesn't have to be like totally done next time. It's just the point of discussion, and then you can kind of take back and you have a little bit of time before you send it in, and then we'll try to create a cohesive document that reads as if we all, as if it's like one voice of the committee.
And some people do their working copy on handwritten on paper, like if you don't want to type it in.
But if you can type in the comments, if I'm gonna merge it, it makes it
Yeah.
a much easier job. The other stuff is easier,
Yeah.
type it in.
I mean, you can't read our handwriting?
It's not a matter of reading it, it's that the text gets quite lengthy, and I'd have to retype it if everybody gave me handwritten copies. If it's like one person with a handwritten copy, or even two, but if I've got 5 to type the whole thing over, it would take me longer than copying and pasting.
She's really selling the chair job for you.
No.
Okay, thank you for explaining that.
Okay. So in the rubric indicators, the first one is 1A, empowers administrators to ensure all instructional staff collaboratively plan, adapt as needed, and implement standard-based units comprised of well-structured lessons aligned to state standards and local curricula. So my rationale for choosing that one was that we have Hopkins that is going to, hopefully at some point, transition to a 5-6 school. And if that's the case, we need to take a look at how curriculum is going to be impacted. So we had developed a Hopkins educational plan. The state requires that we do the same thing for an Elmwood educational plan. We brought in a consultant to take a look at our K-8 science instruction, and she's going to continue with us next year as a consultant. That'll be grant funded, but to make sure that we are now doing science, because one of the things that the state said to us in one of our MSBA meetings was that if you are building that Elmwood school, you need to be able to have your kids doing science. It can't just be, textbook science where kids are accumulating knowledge. It's got to be roll up your sleeves and have a lot of authentic experience. And when they changed the standards in science, there were science practices as well. So that needs to certainly be grown. I am still very much interested in, and I think this is down in the instruction area, and making sure that our special education students' growth scores start to rebound, at growth and achievement scores, really. We are looking at the MCAS civics pilot. Our kids took the MCAS civics test last year, did remarkably well, but they did remarkably well when only a few districts in the state said, sure, we'll give it a try. So this year, when they take the pilot test, we will be joined by the entire rest of the state. So that's going to help us to take a look at some of our social studies curriculum, just adding in the civics pieces that the state requires. We are thinking about growing our computer science work, and so you can see a group of educators that attended a 2-day professional learning on December 7th and 8th in computer science, and we have Mr. Scott thinking about what that looks like in his domain. The MCAS ELA scores 6 to 12, disciplinary literacy. I do want to thank that high school. They have embraced disciplinary literacy, and I think when you look at the grade 10 scores and how so many proficient kids have moved to like the exceeding the standard category in MCAS, I really believe it has a lot to do with that. Colleen Cormier, who is the subject matter leader for social studies, has a company coming in to do professional development exclusive to social studies in disciplinary literacy for all of the teachers grades 6 to 12. And our ELA gurus, a couple of them will be in the room as well, so that, say, for example, Julie Matson wants to go back to the middle school and support that literacy learning, she can do that. So I will move on to instruction. The CRIOP was a huge focus for us this year. You're probably tired of hearing me talk about that. But we really believe that SEL and cultural proficiency have to be in place for kids to feel, truly like they can access curriculum at the highest levels. So again, summer presentation, opening day, CRIOPS and student data, a full PD day consultant work, the co-teaching that's happening at the middle school, specially designed instruction that's going on with Nicole Murray all the way 6 to 12. Our special education student growth scores, we continue to monitor those. We actually did just get cited by DESE for disproportionality because we have a great number of white students who are now being identified as students, SLD, students with learning disabilities. And we think it's because we're catching more of our dyslexia students early on. So, I mean, the nice part of that is that we're solving a problem, but because we have so many of them, the state has cited us for disproportionality. So Abby Hanscom, one of her goals in special education is really the rebounding of those special education scores. And so while I am in that work in terms of the ELA and the math growth and looking at that in the aggregate as well as through the subgroups, she has taken that on as well. And then finally, the other thing that we did was we started looking at evaluation workshopping because we have so many new people to our admin team that we did about 4 or 5 workshops this year on how to really effectively evaluate staff so that you can help them grow and grow in the right ways. So there's just a couple of PowerPoints I had put together for those workshops that we did in-house, and it was really Mr. Lebrad and I doing those. This student learning data that we unearthed examined special education scores, students with disability performance discrepancies, as well as the data DESE offers on growth scores of our students with IEPs. Interestingly, we do actually see some good growth scores, but we don't necessarily see the movement in achievement scores. And we can see it in isolated. When we do case study research, we say, okay, let's take that kid, and we can see some of the things that have made that child successful. And a lot of times, and I think I actually have one that I've embedded in there, you don't see the student's name, but you get to see that student's trajectory. When that kid first took an MCAS test, his score in math was a 434, which is like 4 points above the baseline. That's 444, that's the lowest it can be. And then it got to like 494, which is about 6 points away from being proficient. And that happened over several years, but we kept saying, what was it that we did? And it was incredible personalized attention to that particular student. And, you know, all of the bells and whistles, tutoring and all of that. And it was a student who was never on an IEP until grade 7. But that student made those gains before the IEP. So it was really indicative to us that some of the things that we do that are helpful are things that now we know we can do a little more widely with all of our kids. And I know when I started this, I said I wanted to make sure that 75 to 80% of our kids are like meeting or exceeding expectations in terms of achievement. And that would be all of our students in the aggregate. And tonight you can see that we're there. So that felt really good. So our SGP scores are looking better than those achievement scores. There are places where we are below the 50%, and so we're thinking about that and how to get kids there. We really believe that some of that might be the rigor of instruction. Like we have to make sure that we are all believing that kids can do it, because we think that when they can do it, we get them to do it. So here is a PowerPoint that I had put together in 2021. We actually, as an admin team, revisited this in 2024 because we are now making this sort of doubling down on everybody is going back to that STAR data. So we actually get professional development embedded into the fee that we pay to STAR Renaissance. So they'll be coming in and we're going to retrain everyone and make sure that there are at least, you know, there's at least 1, if not 2 of the reports that everybody can use with super proficiency. And that way there, we're not asking people to do things that are, you know, super advanced in terms of data reading, but it will help them to target instruction for their individual students. All right, Understanded 2, in terms of laws, ethics, and policies. What we have here, all the policies that we worked on this year. These are the monthly meetings that we held with the HTA for labor management. We have updates on legal issues that you know I would share with Nancy and Amanda as those things kind of pop up. The handling of grievances with the HTA, and really, we've only had a couple of stipend grievances, and that happens because if you've overlooked paying someone a stipend in a previous fiscal year, they have to grieve it in order for us to be able to say, yes, now we can pay you. And we say, oh, we know what the remedy is, it's to pay you, and then we pay them. Contract negotiations with the paraprofessionals, that's coming along. School attendance, that's been a big push coming out of the state, and we had folks come to ask about it at a meeting, and I thought it was really important for them to understand sort of the legal background. So I did send that out to all families in the form of a blog, and then we are working with the town to develop the language, and this is also sort of a legal piece to make sure that our relationship with the HCA, now that they have a liquor license, is good. I have not embedded that in there yet, because the town's legal counsel just sent it back to me at about 5 o'clock today. I think we finally come to an agreement on what that language should look like. In terms of fiscal systems, we always say it's going to be a challenging budget season, but this budget season went much more swimmingly than the last. And I mean, that's another one where I feel like you get to see all of the things that happen during budget season. You hear from all the principals, you hear from all the directors, you see every single one of the PowerPoint presentations, every time something changes just a little bit. And here's the annual town meeting presentation for you. Transitioning to Munis, Mrs. Rothernick. It will tell you it's a process.
It's a slog.
A slog. I almost used that word, and I said, I don't know if I want to. But we'll call it slow and steady. But yes, it is a slog. Let's see. So communication, in past years, we've really improved our communications, we think, with families about student learning and performance. And so this year, we wanted to make sure that our communications with L families was going to be like super top notch. And again, I just can't say enough good about Jen Suker. She has held so many events with the LPAC. She did the thing at the high school. She's brought in tools and devices to ensure that she can text with families and they get it in their language, and then it comes back to us in English. She meets with individual families all the time to make sure that as they are onboarding, they feel supported, and if they need a translation of any document or an interpreter at a meeting, we make sure that we get them there, and we are hiring them from very reputable companies so that the interpretation and translation is great. And then we have changed ever so slightly the way families are filling out the online registration materials, because we want to make sure that they have access to that in their language. And so we've had that translated into like maybe our 5 most predominant languages, and then we work on it in other ways if we need to for families who are outside of that. Just sort of that same chart that you saw tonight in terms of our changes in demographics, and I think that we're doing a really nice job of being able to meet the needs of our economically disadvantaged and low-income families. Mrs. Rothernick will talk a little bit about how our thresholds for support are working or not working when we meet again on the 16th. The ELE department, we supported that budgetarily, we had to, obviously, and we thank the school committee for support on that. And just again, CRIOP pillar number 2. In terms of cultural proficiency, you've probably seen a lot of these things before, but we've had SATCH come and present 3 times, HCAA once. We actually are making changes to the physical education curriculum based on a survey that we sent to families saying, what are some of the games that you would play if you were, if you are culturally who you are, and those things will be incorporated. I should have added in here that I went into Deb Pinto's classroom in PE about 2 weeks ago, and it's unified PE. The kids were making mini golf holes, and they actually had putters and indoor golf balls, and they set up this maybe 5 or 6 hole golf course, and we all played mini golf. It was amazing.
You played too?
I sure did, yeah, it was great. Yeah, it was wonderful. Mr. LaFave played. We were all there. So we have the curriculum audit to eliminate bias and anti-racist materials. We're doing that through Blackprint. So that RFP has gone out. We've hired Blackprint, and we are in the process of collecting all that data. The SEL audit, they have all of our data and they're doing the walkthroughs now. The case study of kids who have chosen a non-college bound path, we have that. And again, Mr. Labrada is doing a lot of that work now through grant money, but with a core group of middle school and high school teachers and really thinking about opening up pathways that don't infringe upon something like Keefe Tech, because you can't legally run those same kind of programs. Carla Crisafulli at the high school has done a lot of work with Mass Bay and bringing in like cybersecurity courses, so you're getting kind of early college credit even while you're a high school student. And those kinds of things are looking very good, I think. In terms of continuous learning, this is really where we make sure that all of the people in the admin team and, you know, even our teachers are thinking about leadership and what it means to be an instructional leader. So you can look at the district improvement plan, you can look at all really does mean all. We're thinking again about the subgroups, and you can see some of our agendas that we've used at admin council meetings where we talk about these are the best practices in interpretation and translation. So if you have a need in your building, this is how you make sure you go about it so that our families who speak another language get top services. We looked also at our DESI targets, and you'll be able to click on that too, so you can see they set targets for us every year. In '24, they will tell us if we have arrived at that target or if we are kind of on the pathway to getting there. That's pretty interesting. If you feel like you want to see any of these agendas, like what does it look like when we have PD days, BBMs, staff meetings, PLCs, I'm happy to share those things with you. You have access, I think, to a lot of MCAS and STAR score data in the aggregate. And then you also have the Athena Special Education recommendations. And then the last one is shared vision. Because our demographics are changing and our kids' interests post-high school and trajectories are broadening, I want to make sure that everybody's getting what it is that they need. So whether it is the 5 case studies that we did during math, or the 2 graduated students, or the research of Dr. Martin, or the comp sci work, Mr. Bishop and his team have done a beautiful job evolving the senior project. So it really gets to what a kid wants to sort of how they want to fill their bucket and make sure that it's meaningful and rigorous, but it doesn't necessarily have to be academic. Our kids going to Keefe Tech, I think, are at 27 this year, which is nice. I met with the middle school guidance department to think about ways that we could like kind of grow our Keefe Tech enrollment. And then obviously our US News and World Report. It's really nice to be able to see us doing as well as we are across a lot of demographics. And, you know, kudos to our high school folks. And it's not just our high school folks, because you don't get to be that high school without having a lot of support all the way up K-8, because those teachers are teaching the heck out of it to make sure that our high school kids are prepared to be good high school kids. So, and that's it. That's all of it. I'm sorry it takes so long to go through that every year.
Sorry, the last one, just how do we know, we often say that the trajectories of kids are diversifying. How do we know that?
So some of that comes because I think Lee Greco keeps some good data. And I think when we take a look at that, we say, you know, a lot of kids used to be 4-year private schools, and now a lot of families are moving to state schools. We've got kids who are going to 2-year colleges. And the 2-year colleges have a little program where if you go and you do your 2-year college, you can move on to a 4-year state school, and the cost is very different. When I asked her for the names and email addresses of kids who chose not to go to college, she had them at the ready. She could send those right to me. And I met 4 times this year with the whole high school guidance department to think about that. And they are, well, the changes that they talk about are interesting changes. Some of those changes tell us that our kids are more driven than ever. And we do worry a little bit about that, but some of them say we have kids who are really trying to think about how it is that they can navigate something different within that sort of climate of Hopkinton High School that says, but everybody goes to college, but not everybody really does. So those numbers are just, when we get the, you know, your graduation rates are always very high. But what they do after graduation, like I think this year, when Lee Greco gave me the names, there may have been like 9 kids on that list who deliberately chose not to go to college.
Do you have any data on students who have chosen to go to college, whether they finish their degrees?
So Judy Martin should be able to help us at least with year 1 of, did you stay at that school? Did you drop out of school? All the reasons why people did. Was it a financial hardship that caused you to drop out of school? Was it because it was not what you thought it was? Was it because you went to a school that was a terrible fit for you? Now, all of those. In a previous district, she had carried that out for 5 years with a given class, so we really got to follow them to the end. I'm kind of hoping she would be willing to do that again. It's pro bono work that she does.
What year is what graduating class is year 1?
Class of 23, so right
So
now we'll be
this-
getting
yep.
their first round of data.
So, one thought that kind of pops into my mind is just as a parent, child in that graduating class is, they don't all use their email that they had from the, many of them use different email addresses, and I
Right.
actually venture to guess most. How are they getting follow-up email for those students,
So, it's interesting.
for contact?
Before they graduated, we had them give us personal email
Okay.
addresses so that we have all of that. But she's kind of like a dog with a bone, so if we try to email you and it
Yeah.
bounces back, we know that you're very likely N. Kavanaugh. And then she can just go to the college and find out what the email address is there, so nkavanaugh@vanderbilt.org is going to get something
Get
from
there.
her anyway.
Okay.
And we will tell the kids, like through social media channels, it's coming, watch for it. Yeah.
I think this is a fascinating topic, you know, and I think because someone goes to a community college or a public college, that's still college. It can be very cost-driven.
Yes.
And I think the gap year situation, especially post-pandemic, during the pandemic, the immediate next step is often maybe a year to think about it and get things kind of organized. I don't know what that does in terms of changing the mission of the district, because, you know, much of the intent is still there, although no one should be in the district feeling alienated because they wanted to take a different path. So it's an interesting, interesting puzzle.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
Yes, and imagine that we have a student who wants to go into the construction industry. Like, we wonder if there aren't ways during senior year to be able to have that person, you know, out working and testing that field and to see what it's like. I mean, you've got mass laborers here. Like, it's so easy for our kids to have access to, you know, could you take some kind of course there in small engine repair or,
Yeah.
yeah.
It doesn't mean they won't be reading Shakespeare, though. You know, like.
Exactly,
So
yeah.
there are lots of people who, you know, maybe pick a trade, but also enjoy academics. So it's a very interesting situation.
The student who I interviewed who had chosen a trade said the one thing that student wished was that they had been more attentive to how important math was going to be in life after Hopkinton High School.
There's
But
a
they
Great
also said,
message to blast
you
from
know
the
right,
what?
get a quote there.
They also told me, you know what, if you told me that in high school, I probably wouldn't have believed you, so, yeah. So it's interesting.
They probably were told that.
Yeah, they probably were.
So all of this evidence that Dr. Kavanaugh has presented is in the service of us being able to evaluate on the goals and indicators. If there's additional evidence that people feel like, if you feel like there's more information you need in the process of looking at it, reach out directly to Dr. Kavanaugh. I'm sure you put so much into putting all of this together, but you might be able to clarify if you've got questions that come up between now and then. The one question I did have, because it jumped out at me as you were speaking, was about the disproportionality piece. If I understand it right, the number of white kids on IEPs has increased, and we got cited for that because it's not in line with what our overall demographics are.
Yes, so there are typically categories, so when a student is on an IEP, you have like, sometimes it's a primary area of disability, and then a secondary, and then a tertiary. So there are sort of percentages that you could almost predict, like how many students would you have who are on the autism spectrum, how many students would you have who are diagnosed with Down syndrome, so for us, it's the SLD kids in specific, so specific learning disability.
Yep.
And, typically those are students who are with like reading struggles like dyslexia.
So I guess and maybe it's impossible to know from this, at this point in time, because it's so recent, but why those would be growing differently in different demographics? Is it a matter of, certain, groups of people pursuing the IEP differently, or is it a matter of there being a higher rate of specific learning disabilities in different populations?
It could be the former, and here's why. When the state asked us to do a dyslexia screener, required us to do a dyslexia screener, we had actually done that before the requirement was there. But once the requirement went into place, the state then said that you have to send a letter to any student who is flagged on that screener as a kid who's not at a reading benchmark. And sometimes that happens because you are a K student or one student who really has had like very little literacy exposure. And sometimes it happens because, you just haven't accessed as much curriculum as the kid sitting next to you, or you may need to be double dosed in that curriculum, whereas the kid sitting next to you doesn't, right? So, some of our kids are just sort of slower readers, but there are times when it does mean that you have, and it's only a screener, it doesn't, we can't diagnose that someone has dyslexia, but we then send those letters to all of those families, and let's imagine that 20% of those kids who get a letter really do have a diagnosis, they're yet undiagnosed with dyslexia, but somebody else has just lived in a, less literate environment, and somebody else just needs to be double dosed. Like, when you get that letter as a parent, you go, oh my gosh, and so that may be accounting for the fact that there are more kids who are getting on IEPs earlier. I think Abby alluded to a little bit tonight, but our goal is to get every kid to read at benchmark, so however we get them there.
Maybe I'm misinterpreting what it is, but my concern is not about the increase in the number of kids that are on IEPs. I think that's great that we're catching kids that need services sooner. But the fact that there's a disproportionality in there, or there are kids that are of other races and backgrounds that we're not catching for some reason, that, do you know what I mean? Why, when at the younger grades, we're seeing a greater level of diversity than we are at exiting grades? Why is that diversity decreasing in the number of kids that are going on to IEPs?
Right, so especially with SLD, so there may be kids from other demographics, non-white students, whose parents aren't asking for that kind of testing, right?
So it's the group of parents asking for the testing as opposed to.
I don't think we've done a deep enough dive yet to say, have parents ask for that kind of testing, and that's how it's resulted, but.
Yeah, there's a very big difference between the schools coming to you and saying, we think your child needs to be tested, and then having some of that testing covered differently than a parent noticing some things and seeking private testing on their own, and then coming back to the district and saying, this is what the findings are. Like, it's two very different processes. That's what I'm getting at,
exactly right there.
Correlation's not a causation.
All right, so I always appreciate how much goes into this, in the fact that you've done this now multiple times in 1 year, both for the formative and now for the summative, but also along the way you've updated us on a lot of this, so I appreciate the depth of the information.
Well, a lot of it relies on an amazing admin team, so I have to thank
You do have a
Mrs.
superstar
Roderick.
team.
Yeah, Mr. Lebrad and everybody, they're all part of this.
Okay, so we'll get those pre-filled out for what goals and indicators we're actually looking at. And then we'll bring that back to have a group discussion, and then people can get those to me, to give me, if we have 2 weeks between the two meetings, then if we could get it like at the midpoint so that I have some time to put it together. All right, that moves us into the Lou and Kathy White Scholarship.
Okay, so we just need for you to authorize payment from the town treasurer for the Lou and Kathy White Memorial Scholarship, and that is $500.
Move to authorize payment of Lou and Kathy White Memorial Scholarship in the amount of $500.
Okay, motion by Amanda, second by Adam. All those in favor?
Aye.
And it is unanimous. And then the Annette Joyce Flo Memorial Scholarship.
Okay, so again, we need for you to authorize payment from the town treasurer for the Annette Joyce Flo Memorial Scholarship in the amount of $500.
Move to authorize parents in the Annette Joyce Flora Memorial Scholarship in the amount of $500.
Motion by Adam. Is there a second? Second by Susan. All those in favor?
Aye.
That is unanimous, and that moves us into the STEM Scholarship.
Okay, so we have the STEM Scholarship, and that, again, we need you to authorize the town treasurer to make the payment for the STEM Scholarship, at this time in the amount of $5,000.
I move to authorize payment of the STEM scholarship in the amount of $5,000.
Motion by Susan. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Second by Lori. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Also unanimous and passes. I am aware of the time, and I also am aware that we have a lot of things for the 16th already on the, what we want to do. Are there things that we feel like are going to be lengthy that we could push off?
I think policy IJOA can wait.
Okay. Let's put that off then. The intent to travel, I'm assuming, is time pressing, so we want
Yes.
to go ahead and do that.
Okay, that would be great. This request comes from Marjorie Billiter at the high school. She would like you to approve 32 high school students, and they've all qualified for the HOSA International Leadership Conference. It's in Houston, Texas, June 26th to the 30th, and she would like for you to approve that travel.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome.
I move to approve travel to Houston, Texas to attend HOSA from June 26th to the 30th, 2024.
Motion by Susan.
Second.
Second by Adam. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and then,
There's gonna see JLB, I think that we can, if Susan is gonna do we have to do that now? Because if Susan's gonna do an update in a couple of weeks.
okay, so do we want to put,
could
is that
probably put
okay if
that
we
off.
put that off?
Yes.
For a couple of weeks?
They're only here together because we started looking at one, and you couldn't look at
I-
one without looking at the
All
other.
right, so let's jump into the Elmwood School
Sorry.
gift account.
All right, and this one's very easy. We just need you to accept a donation from the Hopkinton Education Foundation in the amount of $8,330 to fund the Elmwood Library with various book series.
That's excellent. Is there a motion on that?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second by Susan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We're hoping this hooks some readers when they get hooked on a
That's
series. That's what we're
Fabulous.
hoping.
We are very fortunate to have so many great organizations supporting our schools. The Hopkinton
Yes.
Education Foundation
Oh my
comes through with a lot of grant funding for us. All right, any future agenda items that we want to throw out, or you can also email if you think of them. All right, that moves us into items by consensus.
Okay, as superintendent, I recommend the school committee approve the items by consensus as outlined in your agenda.
So moved.
Motion by Amanda, second by Susan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that moves us down into adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Okay, motion by Susan. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Second by Amanda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and we are adjourned at 10:14. Our next meeting is the April 30th Hopkins Lower Middle School Community Forum. That is here. That is on Tuesday. Is that a 7 o'clock or a 6 o'clock start? I thought we
I'm
looked
guessing
at
it's
that.
6.
Yep.
I think it's
And
six.
then
Yeah, just shut my
we
computer
have the
too.
May 2nd regular meeting and special workshop on the superintendent's evaluation, and then annual town meeting, and then May 16th for our regular. All right, thank you. Thank you everyone for hanging in there. Have a good night.